representation in Tess for a good part of today's session. We're also going to be looking at a whole bunch of themes, though. I want to start off by kind of doing what I did when I looked at Wuthering Heights vis-a-vis Pride and Prejudice, look at some similarities and some dissimilarities. Then we'll talk about some themes of realism, themes of romance. I want to look at romance and consent, as well as realism and consent. We're going to have a close reading of the scene in The Chase. I'll attach the reading to the chat in a document form. And then in the second half of today's session, we'll look at Tess in the context of what critics describe as a rape culture. And then finally, we'll look at Tess as it might relate to chivalry, which is kind of haunted this whole unit if we return back to kind of our first session, looking at some defining features of romance. A lot of romance went back to those medieval narratives of courtly love and chivalry, but in a way it's only until we get to Tess of the D'Urbervilles that chivalry undergoes a very severe type of problematization. And I think maybe we'll orient our discussion around whether chivalry kind of exists today, what its future is, what its purpose was. I wanted to start, though, by giving another little piece of historical context to the composition of Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and maybe begin by kind of discussing why Tess is a tragedy or a romantic tragedy as opposed to a romance novel, and how tragedy differs when we come to think about narrative structures from romance. You'll see here on the left, we have a letter here from Thomas Hardy to a friend of his called Hester Pinney. It's dated the 20th of January, 1926, very late in his life, but it's a letter about a historical woman called Martha Brown. Martha Brown was the last woman to be hung in Dorset, the city where Thomas Hardy came from. She was hung because she killed her husband with an axe. It wasn't as simple as that. Her husband had been beating her, forcing her to do many horrible things, and she basically kind of refused to be oppressed anymore, and she defended herself with an axe rather than being whipped and kind of scourged by him. And the letter from Thomas Hardy to Hester Pinney is describing Hardy when he was a lot younger, age 16, recollecting his attendance at the hanging of Martha Brown for the murder of her husband. He writes, my sincere thanks for the details about that unhappy woman, Martha Brown, whom I am ashamed to say I saw hanged. My only excuse being that I was but a youth and had to be in town at that time for other reasons. I remember what a fine figure she showed against the sky as she hung in the misty rain, and how the tight black silk gown set off her shape as she wheeled half around and back. A very disturbing image, but nonetheless, a lot of scholars connect the creation of Tess to Hardy's kind of knowledge about Martha Brown, a woman very similar in ways to Tess. She was described as a very beautiful young lady who kind of got trapped basically in a type of domestic horror and pushed to the extremes. She went on to kill her husband. Hardy mentions here that he was very ashamed to say that he went and saw this woman hung. Hanging in the 19th century was somewhat commonplace, either hung or transported to colonies such as Australia. But I think one of the things that this letter foregrounds, and the whole novel of Tess of the D'Urbervilles foregrounds, is that in one respect, the people who went to see Martha Brown hung, but also the people who went to see justice done, didn't actually feel like Martha Brown deserved to be hung. They didn't feel like it was a just punishment for someone who was basically defending themselves. Now I want to read the final paragraph of Tess, and think about this in view to Tess's narrativization as what we would call a tragedy. And I'll talk about a tragedy in a moment. The final paragraph, final sentence, justice was done, and the presidents of the Immortals, in Aeschylean phrase, had ended his sport with Tess, and the D'Urberville knights and dames slept on in their tombs unknowing. The two speechless gazers bent themselves down to the earth as if in prayer, and remained thus a long time, absolutely motionless. The flag continued to wave silently. As soon as they had strength, they arose, joined hands again, and went on. So this is the conclusion of Tess. It concludes with this idea, not at all unlike what happened to Martha Brown, that Tess ends up getting hung for killing Alec d'Urberville, and justice. Justice in the rabbit ears here was done in Aeschylean phrase. Aeschylus was the famous Greek dramatist who is kind of credited with having invented this narrative structure known as a tragedy. The presidents of the Immortals, some type of godlike deity, has finished his sport with Tess. And then you have this allusion perhaps to romance, the medieval romance of the past. D'Urberville knights and dames, those good-doing heroes of medieval lore, slept on unknowing. Romance kind of was a bit indifferent to what happens to Tess. I wanted to ask, before I get into talking a little bit about tragedy. Did anyone find the very, as soon as they had strength, they arose, joined hands again, and went on? Isn't it a very depressing ending? Remember the ending of Wuthering Heights, where Lockwood stares down at the tombstones and wonders, those two lovers, they're not going to be silent beyond the grave. There's a bit of hope there. Is there any kind of redemptive spirit or any kind of progressive?
Sorry, Chris, just letting you know, it seems to be a thing that we're all experiencing, but you're kind of glitching in and out, so it's kind of hard to hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I'll leave that question, and hopefully the glitching stops, because that's quite annoying. But thanks for letting me know about that. Hopefully it kind of won't be a constant thing. Most of them have been considered romances, particularly Pride and Prejudice being a comic romance. By the time we romance towards a narrative structure described as tragedy, tragedies kind of are often seen as in conflict with romance in a number of ways, because what they do is drastically different. So often tragedies are about the failure of justice, the failure of a justice system to actually arrive at any sense of justice. I think we do kind of see this in Tests of the D'Urbervilles. We have a victim who is sacrificed and eventually hung, very much like Martha Brown. Justice kind of is enacted, but it just seems to be a type of legalistic convention, and the reader's wondering about, what greater justice is there? Tragedies differ from romances as well, as in they do feature heroes, people of exceptional character. Am I still blurring?
Yes.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. A little bit.
Not as bad as what you were, though, but you are still a little bit glitchy.
Okay. I'm not too sure what I can do about that, but I'm sorry. Hopefully you can hear me. I don't think it's too, it doesn't matter too much if I'm glitchy, but let's just try and carry on. Romances feature heroes, people of exceptional character, but they tend to perfect themselves and end up succeeding. They overcome the barriers that are set up for them. Tragedies are often seen as being very devoid of humor or comedy. Is Tess a very funny novel?
A funny novel.
No, it does have a few little funny moments, but the humor doesn't dominate the novel. Um, there's no dark humor like we find in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. So tragedies are often very devoid of comedy. Tragedies often will sacrifice their protagonist to the social world. The hero is often ejected from society rather than incorporated into the social world. If you think of Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth gets incorporated into the beautiful world of Pemberley. In a way, the effect of tragedies differ from romances significantly when it comes to the way readers react, designed to provoke an external response, kind of pre-existing assumptions about the nature of the world, good and evil, kind of, if we're going to actually have to externally, in our own time, do some things. We're going to have to make sacrifices to contribute to make the world a little better. Tragedies also, when you look at the history of the narrative, emerged much later than romance. So what talked about in a way as romances throughout this unit are stories in which kind of heroes overcome impediments to kind of recreate or kind of resolve some utopia. Tragedies emerge much later in the history of narrative because they're often kind of much more complicated and about the more cruel realities of the world. So when we come to look at Tess of the D'Urbervilles compared to Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights, we will see similarities because Tess is, in a way, a romantic tragedy, and you do have similar themes to do with romance. So all three novels deal in marriage across class boundaries. So Angel marries Tess, a bit like Darcy marries Elizabeth. The novels are also about romantic love as opposed to economic love, but also in this case about what we would call coercive sexual assault, which is not a type of love, I don't think. I don't think we should apply love to that behaviour.
Absolutely not.
They're kind of driven by a similar perspective. All of the narratives we've looked at have villains: Heathcliff, Wickham, Alec. You kind of have kind of sub-partnerships. They're definitely conscious of marriage and inheritance laws. Once Angel and Tess are married, they're kind of stuck together. Angel doesn't really want to divorce Tess, and Tess can't really do much but kind of possibly propose to kill herself at a very extreme level to kind of unburden him of her. They're different in many ways. Tess, of course, is about a female servant, someone from a working class. She forms the central subject of the romance. And by working class, I mean working class in the sense that Tess has to work to survive. She has nothing else but her labour to sell to survive. Much more different. Tess does seem, and as we'll see, it's a novel about the sexuality behind romantic love, which has been creeping about in the other novels we've been looking about, but it hasn't been rendered too explicit. Tess explores the consequences of sexual contact before marriage. This makes the novel about this thing called A Fallen Woman, and I hope some of you, at least some of you, had a look at that documentary on the fallen woman. There's no poetic justice in Tess. Good does not succeed. Bad gets punished, but not really. Tess is very reflexive about the nature of romance. In a way, it's a critique of romance. In a way, Tess is also about those economic realities that are somewhat hinted at by Jane Austen, but they're never really realised. Tess also develops a completely different type of realism to either what we saw in Jane Austen's world and Emily Bronte's world. Tess is different from these novels in being a romantic tragedy. I did have a question here because I remember raising this in terms of the idea of evil being able to produce good, in terms of how kind of Heathcliff creates an environment in which Hetton and Catherine Heathcliff can kind of bring about some romantic conclusion for the good to their world. Do you think Tess, in a way, is about the opposite? It's about the fact that the good doers often are the sowers of evil. I'm thinking of that kind of ancient phrase, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Do we see that at all in Tess? That goodness, the people trying to think they're good and behaving good, often kind of can do horrible things?
Is this talking mostly about Angel and the way that Angel acts towards Tess?
Yeah, Angel, definitely. Yeah, well, Angel's name kind of says a bit, doesn't it, Amber?
Yeah. I never even think about that until it kind of has to be pointed out. But I more see his actions and the way that he kind of tried to help her and tried to, and when he came back for her, he thought that he was doing good, and it seemed like all these good actions ended up with worse consequences in the end.
Does anyone else kind of have an opinion on whether, particularly religion is portrayed as a force for good in this novel?
I know there's a few of you in here. No one? I know that there is.
Did anyone, it's very specific, but there's a scene where Tess, after Angel leaves for South America and basically abandons her, Tess has got no money, she needs support, and she tries to reach out to Angel's parents, who are religious people. Angel's father is a religious preacher, and she walks a very long way, and she's got 2 pairs of shoes. She's got walking shoes, and then she's got more presentable shoes. Does anyone know what happens to her shoes?
I can't remember what happens to her shoes.
It's pretty particular, isn't it? It's one of those questions that I might put on the quiz.
It's not the brothers, but is it the neighbor or something? She picks them up and goes, "Oh, these are nice. I'm going to donate them to someone who needs them." So they get taken.
Yeah, they steal her shoes, and Tess hides her shoes because she wants to look presentable in the bush. And they come along, Cuthbert and Felix, and they're like, "Oh, look, some wasteful person has thrown away their shoes. Let's take these shoes and give them to some poor person in our community." So the religious people literally steal Tess's shoes. If you look at the way religion's portrayed throughout the entirety of the novel, you have these good doers all throughout it who are, we are doing all good works here. And there's the guy that goes around spray painting kind of religious iconography on trees. There's the priest in Tess's community who basically says, "Sorry, your child's a bastard. We're not going to bury it in the local cemetery. You need to put it in an outcast plot because it would go against the good of our community." So you do find in Tess of the D'Urbervilles a weird inversion that you kind of see reversed, I would suggest, in Wuthering Heights, where people go about thinking they're doing very good, when often what the effects they have on Tess are quite extreme and quite horrible. I want to talk about the beauty of Tess before I talk about not Tess the person, the narrative and the environment and the landscape, before we talk about some of the real big issues to Tess. Did anyone find the representations of the ecology and the environment just wonderful to read? Thumbs up from Amber. I mean, some of you chose to write on this book for your essays. Dana, you chose to write on Tess and you gave a wonderful presentation. So I'm wondering, why what struck you about Tess more than the other novels? Was it kind of a well-written novel, or was it the content or the themes that really struck you?
It was definitely more the story than the writing. Like, if we're talking written, I preferred Pride and Prejudice. That was a much easier read for me personally than Tess. But I think the content in Tess was a lot more, entertaining or inviting to read. Like, there was a sort of, I want to know what happens next.
Sure.
Whereas I found Pride and Prejudice quite mundane in that sense of everyone knew where it was going.
Yeah,
In that sense, I think Tess has a lot more depth and wealth to it than Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights as well.
Yeah, the narrative does keep you hoping in a way, keeps you hoping for something, hoping something good is going to happen. But Pride and Prejudice, there's this intuitive relationship to the text. You kind of have an assumption that things are going to work out pretty fine by the close of the novel. But in terms of where Hardy sits in the history of realism, he really represents the very pinnacle of being able to represent the world in an extremely precise manner. So when we're thinking about realism, Tess of the D'Urbervilles is a very denotated, it's very epistemological, it's very sociological. I would say it's almost ethnozoological in the way certain relationships and environments get represented and communities get represented. A lot of the representations, and I'll read one in a moment, they're almost akin to a David Attenborough documentary. In terms of the natural history, Thomas Hardy seems to know about all the plants outside his window. He knows their names. He knows kind of what spaces they inhabit, what ecologies they create. In a way, however, Tess is also a bit anti-realistic in areas. So some of the scenes in Tess blur what you would call high Victorian realism. Has anyone heard of the pre-Raphaelite painters, where they have that very minute description of little things, beetles and butterflies and medieval tapestries and extreme forms of just minute Victorian detail, which you see in architecture as well. Hardy does that really well, but there's certain scenes in which the realism gives way to kind of being blurred with mythical subject matter. So there's a scene in Tess, for example, where Angel's playing the harp, and Tess kind of creeps up to listen to him like an animal. And it's very much redolent of the story of Orpheus trying to communicate with his harp to animals. The dances at the Chaseborough dance, they're also framed as mythical satyrs and nymphs. So a lot of the realism kind of often blurs with a type of mythical form of representation. But Tess is extremely detailed in terms of the environment, the flora and the fauna. They're often compounded with a deep type of time to form a type of ecological vision. Ecology kind of is a word that gets invented in the 1870s or 1860s, so you don't really see it getting used kind of in earlier novels, although there may be a kind of proto-ecological imagination. Ecology, the study of the way organisms relate to each other, really comes about in the latter half of the 19th century. Likewise, Hardy's representation of the agricultural world, the animals and the labor that people have to do, you could often go to Thomas Hardy's novels as primary sources if you were studying history, because they're much more precise than anything you'll find in some type of photograph or agricultural manual. So when you read some aspects of Tess, and I'm hoping I'm not glitching here, you often find that Hardy will often do he'll often do something like out of the David Attenborough documentary, where he'll speed up the environment to show the way nature's a living entity or a kind of sequence of relationships. So one of the beginning of chapter 20, Hardy begins like this. The season developed and matured. Another year's installments of flowers, leaves, nightingales, thrushes, finches, and such ephemeral creatures took up their positions where only a year ago others had stood in their place, when these were nothing more than germs and inorganic particles. Rays from the sunrise drew forth the buds and stretched them into long stalks, lifted up sap in noiseless streams, opened petals, and sucked out scents in invisible jets and breathings. does that sound a little bit like a type of, you know how you often watch a David Attenborough documentary, maybe some of you guys don't watch them anymore, where they'll be studying the secret lives of plants. And of course, plants move and creep about, but you never really see them. Hardy seems to play around with time in particular to show readers during this period the way the environment is this living type of entity. But kind of to Dana's point, Tess is also very realistic in terms of its just brute narrative structure. So Tess is realism in one sense. Just if you look at the plotting of Tess, Tess is forced to seek employment with somebody she does not trust. This is a common kind of problem, not just historically, probably right now, here today. Tess is assaulted and eventually Tess is raped. Tess is ostracized from her family and her community. Tess has a child. The child dies. Tess becomes a moral outcast. Tess attempts to rebuild her life. Tess is abandoned by her husband. Tess and her family are evicted from their home after her father dies. She becomes homeless. Tess is forced by economic determinants to become the mistress of a man who raped her. Tess then murders this man. Tess is hung by the crown. This is a very grim kind of catabasis or downward spiral. It's very realistic in the sense that some people do have a kind of very, very, very kind of extreme run of bad luck. Often a lot of people who don't like Thomas Hardy, and it's kind of true of many of his later novels, he's very fatalistic. He's often tortures his characters, I think, and I don't think that's kind of too realistic, although these narratives do happen to people. I mentioned Martha Brown at the beginning of this session. Hardy kind of hints at but denies the possibility of romance, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But a few of you mentioned this issue of fate when it comes to the plotting of Tess. In a way, randomness, just blind, random bad luck tends to control Tess's fortunes. It's just an accident that when Tess goes to Trantridge to claim kin with Alec, she doesn't meet Mrs. Stokes. Things may have worked out much better if Alec hadn't have been there, if Alec had have been in London and she got introduced to the mother, because the mother doesn't know that Tess is claiming kin. She never finds out. It's also random chance that throws Angel in Tess's way. So it's a completely different narrative structure, and one perhaps much in line when we talked about the invention or development of natural selection, because natural selection is really just reproduction times chance and diversification. There is intentionality and agency. We do have some form of will, but often it's just the universe that throws atoms together that collide that end up leading us to where we are and where we are not. The realism in Tess, in a way, is not some kind of wicked plotting, but perhaps the suggestion that Hardy's making is that often randomness and brute chance tend to dictate kind of the outcomes we can achieve in our lives. I'm hoping some of you had a look at that documentary on the fallen woman. If not, that's okay. You can view it in your own time. Tess is also very realistic because it's a narrative plotting kind of the predicament of this thing the Victorians call a fallen woman, which was to some extent what Lydia was supposed to have become if she had have not married George Wickham. So if you read a lot of 19th century fiction, you're suddenly struck by this figure of the fallen woman, sometimes because no one tells you that there is this thing called a fallen woman. You just don't know why on earth this woman is so pitied and so outcast. For example, Elizabeth Gaskell, very famous Victorian novelist, kind of wrote one of the first novels on working class life called Mary Barton, which is an industrial romance. In that novel, there's a character called Esther. Esther is a fallen woman because she had sex out of wedlock. She's seen as morally corrupt, therefore, and she's pitied throughout the entirety of the novel. If any of you have heard of Charles Dickens's novel Bleak House, kind of that's been adapted, a very kind of very, very popular adaptation. I think who's the lady that plays Scully in The X-Files? Sorry, I'm having a brain lapse here. Gillian Anderson?
Anderson, yeah.
Yeah, she plays Lady Deadlock in Bleak House, and Lady Deadlock, it's revealed in Bleak House, had a love affair with a sergeant, not unlike George Wickham, although he's a bit more noble. His name's Nemo in Bleak House. But the disgrace of being discovered to have had an affair out of wedlock prompts Lady Deadlock to try and bury herself while alive in a cemetery. She descends down the moral hierarchy of Victorian society and is found in a cemetery of unconsecrated ground, trying to dig her own grave because of the shame. In another Victorian novel by George Eliot called Adam Bede, there's a character called Hetty Sorrel who is seduced by an aristocrat, and she has a baby out of wedlock, and she ends up committing an act of infanticide to kind of hide the moral kind of outrage that was provoked by having a child out of wedlock. So this fallen woman, as you'll see if you take the time to watch the documentary, was a significant gender identity that kind of shaped notions of virtue and chastity throughout the entirety of the Victorian period. And we definitely see that, hopefully, when we come to look at the way Tess is represented as being both beautiful but tragic, in the sense that she's had this supposed fall. But in terms of the plotting of Tess, if you have a fall in a Victorian narrative like this, you go down, you don't go up, and you often end up either dead or an outcast. And usually the narrator, Elizabeth Gaskell, was a wonderful, progressive, somewhat proto-feminist writer, but at the same time, she had some very bizarre kind of moral views on the idea of people having sex before they got married, and she did kind of condemn Esther. And she also wrote another novel called Ruth, which is just about that. This character, Ruth, who gets seduced, she has to live basically on the outside of society for the rest of the novel and do acts of good deeds to try to make up or reconstruct her moral character. There's a lot of realism going on in the plotting of Tess. What I would further suggest is the romance novel. The whole kind of idea of the romance novel is somewhat contextualized in Tess. So often there'll be scenes where Hardy, or one of her characters, will refer to the history and purpose of romance in literature. So when Tess returns after her fall with Alec, after she's assaulted by Alec, she kind of tries to defend herself by saying, you know, if only I was educated, if only there was literature out there to warn me about people like Alec d'Urberville. Likewise, romance itself is realistically represented by Tess's mother, Joan d'Urberville, who perpetuates a very fairy tale romance view of a character like Alec. So romance itself is realistically represented. What about realism and women? Did anyone think, maybe laying aside Tess because she's probably not the best example here, but some of the other female characters in Tess, were they realistically represented? Was there some dynamic to their character?
I think they probably got like as much attention in the movie and in the books as what they would have probably in real life.
You thinking about Tess's friends?
Yeah, I guess, and just like all the women in general, like, I don't know, I didn't feel like they played a part, but none of them were as significant as like Alec or, oh my God, what's the other guy's name? Angel. Yes.
I kind of think a lot of the supporting characters are quite dynamic. You have not just kind of realistic descriptions of body and whatnot, but you have realistic descriptions of them not being angelic. Women fight in Tess. They fight. A lot of them are drinkers. Some of them want to kill themselves. They don't want to live. Some of them live kind of free, loving lives. They don't care about social conventions. Some of them even have beards and moustaches, particularly some of the more rustic of them, there's very dynamic representations of kind of aberrant forms of kind of womanhood that kind of depart from traditional notions of what a woman is supposed to look like. In a way, Hardy is trying to reveal what the lives, particularly of working class women, look like, rather than represent romantic notions of femininity. I think that you see in the supporting characters, but you may not actually see when it comes to Tess. But if we look at some of the working class women, have a look at this passage. In addition to Tess, Marion and Iz, who were working class women, there were two women from a neighbouring village, two Amazonian sisters, whom Tess, with a start, with fear, remembered as Dark Car, the Queen of Spades, and her junior, the Queen of Diamonds, those who had tried to fight with her in the midnight quarrel at Tranchridge. They showed no recognition of her and possibly had none, for they had been under the influence of liquor on that occasion and were only temporarily sojourners there as here. They did all kinds of men's work by preference, including well sinking, hedging, ditching, and excavating without any sense of fatigue. Noted reed drawers were they too, and looked round upon the other three with some superciliousness. Are these women you'd see in a Jane Austen novel?
No.
Is that just a silly kind of course not, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't see the Queen of Spades. She'd kick down the door at Pemberley and she'd be there kind of digging a ditch. These types of representations, I find them quite marvellous, because if you look at the history of labour representation, there's this idea that women were completely curtailed to the domestic sphere, but then you run into a woman like Dark Car, who's doing all kinds of work. Do they like doing this work?
Probably no.
Maybe the fact that they have autonomy over themselves and their choices. I don't know particularly about the specific work, but I guess the fact that they can work their own and hold their own, I think that would be, I guess, liberating.
Is that true of Tess as well? Does Tess want to work?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I think she's given the preference by Alec to become like a kept woman, and she doesn't want anything to do with that. And when her parents want to send her off to kind of claim kin, she'd prefer to work. She would prefer to kind of do manual labor. These women do all kinds of men's work by preference, and they're good at it, and they do it just as good as men do. And they kind of look down upon others who lack their kind of ability to work like them. Whenever I read this passage, it reminds me of that. Did anyone see that Hard Yakka ad? You know, remember those Hard Yakka ads? Those like kind of men trying to drag a truck up a kind of mine. Hard Yakka. Does anyone remember that yet? That ad? Hard Yakka. And the it's always men. It's always men in the Hard Yakka ads, although it's kind of slowly changing. The great thing about all of Thomas Hardy's novels is you get realistic representations of people kind of all persuasions, and they're often kind of very detailed and very admirable. They're not completely romanticized. They're just very realistic and to the point. And like when you look back at labour history, you can look back to Thomas Hardy and know that you're going to get some good aspects to do with the truth of the matter. Another kind of big realistic aspect to do with Tess, in a way, Tess is about the ossification of this traditional romance of chivalry, the knight in shining armour coming in to save the day, to kind of spear George Wickham away. So in a way, Tess is a romance, but the romance itself is it ossifies. It becomes like a sclerotic bone or something that you can see and kind of take apart. The romance, for example, of Tess's heritage as this medieval grand dame, this Norman conqueror, it becomes apparent that it's kind of congealed into this narrative about extinction. Her family's extinct, and then it becomes a narrative about survival. Nevertheless, Tess's family, and this is their whole problem, is they still believe in the mythology of romance, that romance can actually probably lead them somewhere, which of course it doesn't. Rather than finding itself embedded in plot, chivalry, courtly love, and the quest kind of are repeatedly exposed by Hardy as mythic failings. Does anyone go on a quest in Tess? An idiotic quest, we might say? Just to specify, a quest is like, going on a journey, often to overcome some barrier. It may be a moral barrier, maybe, like Frodo taking back the ring to throw into the volcano.
Was that Angel heading off to South America?
Yeah, was that not an idiotic quest? Like, what does he do there? He's like, oh, I'm going to leave, and because it's very traditional of romance. A lot of the romance novels from this period, I mentioned Elizabeth Gaskell before. She wrote a novel called Wives and Daughters, and there's a character in this novel called Roger Hamley, and he does the same thing. He goes on a quest to Africa to do some natural history, and when he comes back, of course, his lover's waiting there for him. Is Angel's quest, how does that work out for him? Does it actually work, or what happens to Angel when he goes to South America?
Doesn't he just stay there?
I guess he got sick.
That's right, Sarisha. He gets sick and then lays around, and then some friend he was getting sick with said, you're a total douchebag. That woman you're kind of talking about was probably the best thing that ever happened to you. I'd probably go back there and kind of get over yourself. So the quest totally kind of fails. It just doesn't seem to make any sense, that quest. Likewise, when we're going to do a reading of the chapter from Tess, we'll look at chivalry and the performance of romance, and they do seem to be kind of exposed as total failings. So that's something to think about if you're thinking about romance in Tess. Look at those traditional tropes to do with romance and how they're appearing. Let's talk a little bit about romance in Tess, because nonetheless, even though there's a whole lot of realism, a good chunk of the novel, particularly the phase when Tess is described as rallying, when she recovers her life and kind of enters into a romance with Angel, there is a romance kind of embedded in the middle of Tess. So Tal Buffet's Dairy, where Tess meets and falls in love with Angel Clare, is a type of prelapsarian utopia. It is a type of heaven on earth. It's a very beautiful place. People live there in harmony with each other, but also in harmony with the animals. The dairy relationship between cows and humans doesn't seem to be as bad as some of the other relationships between humans and animals we see. It's also a very romantic place because it's a repository of romance and folk tales. Angel describes it as like a medieval space. Does anyone remember any of the stories that Farmer Crick tells, or is that just, being way too specific? Dairyman Crick. Does he tell kind of interesting stories to people while they're at work?
I do not recall.
He does. He tells a story about a guy coming home from a wedding who's crossing a field, and a bull starts chasing him, but to stop the bull from chasing him, he starts playing music on a fiddle, and the bull gets seduced by the sound of the fiddle. He also tells a romance about a guy who had an affair with a woman before they got married, and the mother comes and chases him into this churn pit, and she tries to churn him up and forces him to marry the daughter. So there's a lot of romance going on during Tess's visit to the dairy. Tess is also idolized by Angel as a type of goddess figure, which is more romanticization, but nonetheless it kind of fits into that category of romance. Tess's predicament is also kind of foreshadowed by aspects of what we would call Gothic romance. There's this superstition of the d'Urberville carriage that when you hear it, something really bad's going to happen. Tess's rape in The Chase is foreshadowed as well by this story of the killing of a white hart. So there's whole lots of romance kind of embedded in Tess there. There's also a whole lot of romanticization. Sorrow's name, much like Angel's, Sorrow being Tess's child that does not live very long, poor child, points towards aspects of romance, points towards forms of personification. The sun itself holds a peculiar type of patriarchal agency. The sun is often referred to as a he. It's given a gender. The environment is repeatedly shown to work to personify character. So if you're looking at personification and character in your essays, definitely have a look at those key scenes where Tess is out in the environment. Time itself is also given a personal pronoun. So however realistic the novel may always seem, there is a lot of romance going on, a lot of abstraction going on. And in terms of high romance, the novel closes with Tess being arrested while sleeping on an altar at Stonehenge. Is that really likely to happen? Or would we more likely be getting busted at McDonald's on Elizabeth Street or something like that, Are you really going to get caught at Stonehenge in such a romantic and sacrificial kind of area?
So funny.
One further thing I want to suggest as we transition from kind of general discussion of themes of romance and realism concerns the issue of consent, because I did mention at the beginning that we will be talking about sexual assault and rape. We can't really avoid not talking about it when reading a novel like this. One of the really interesting things to consider, and consent's been it's been a really important topic of late, because consent kind of really needs to be kind of taught and educated. So if you're thinking about becoming a teacher at high school and teaching a novel, think about Tess, because in one way, the idea of consent, however strange this may sound, and we'll look at realism and consent in a moment, the romance between Tess and Angel often features consent as something that gets romanticized. By this, I mean to say there are certain passages when Tess and Angel are falling in love, and the love itself hinges upon the question of consent. Angel doesn't want to kind of kiss or do anything coercive or physical with Tess unless she knows she's consenting. So there's that scene where there's been a flood overnight, and Angel has to carry the 4 dairymaids across the flooded water, if you can picture that scene. And Angel carries them all, and of course he's infatuated with Tess, and he's carrying her over, and he says, "Oh, Tessie." The girl's cheek burned to the breeze, and she could not look into his eyes for her emotion. It reminded Angel that he was somewhat unfairly taking advantage of an accidental position, and he went no further with it. No definite words of love had crossed their lips as yet, and suspension at this point was desirable now. However, he walked slowly to make the remainder of the distance as long as possible, but at last they came to the bend, and the rest of their progress was in full view of the other 3. The dry land was reached, and he set her down. So there's this moment in Tess where Angel seems to have complete control over Tess's body. Much like the swoon, which we've seen in other novels, there is a mini-type swoon where Angel gets to kind of carry his lover in an infantile fashion, and there is a moment where he could just try and smooch Tess if he's so pleased, and perhaps it's going to be very intuitive here. But in this romance and in most of their interactions, Angel kind of, he's very cautious to kind of figure out whether Tess is actually consenting to this type of activity, which of course you don't see when it comes to Alec. It's often the other way around. You also see this a little bit later when it comes to the almost kiss that they have while Tess is milking one of the cows. Would anyone like to read this passage? It's quite a beautiful passage. I'm like looking at you, Caitlin, because you've got your screen on, but
Sure.
would you like to read it?
Sure. Actually, no, that should be fine. Okay. How very lovable her face was to him. Yet there was nothing ethereal about it. All was real vitality, real warmth, real incarnation. And it was in her mouth that this culminated. Eyes almost as deep and speaking he had seen before, and cheeks perhaps as fair, brows as arched, a chin and throat almost as shapely. Her mouth he had seen nothing to equal on the face of the earth. To a young man with the least fire in him, that little upward lift in the middle of her red top lip was distracting, infatuating, maddening. He had never before seen a woman's lips and teeth which forced upon his mind with such persistent iteration the old Elizabethan simile of roses filled with snow. Perfect. He, as a lover, might have called them offhand. But no, they were not perfect. And it was the touch of the imperfect upon the would-be perfect that gave the sweetness, because it was that which gave the humanity. Claire had studied the curves of those lips so many times that he could reproduce them mentally with ease. And now, as they again confronted him, clothed with colour and life, they sent an aura over his flesh, a breeze through his nerves, which well nigh produced a calm, and actually produced by some mysterious physiological process, a Prozac sneeze, sorry, and then became
prosaic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
She then became conscious that he was observing her, but she would not show it by any change of position, though the curious dream-like fixity disappeared, and a close eye might easily have discerned that the rosiness of her face deepened, and then faded till only a tinge of it was left. The influence that had passed into Claire like an excitation from the sky did not die down. Resolutions, reticences, prudences, fears, fell back like a defeated battalion. He jumped up from his seat and, leaving his pail to be kicked over if the milcher had such a mind, went quickly towards the desire of his eyes, and kneeling down beside her, clasped her in his arms. Tess was taken completely by surprise, and she yielded to his embrace with unreflecting inevitableness. Having seen that it was really her lover who had advanced, and no one else, her lips parted, and she sank upon him in her momentary joy, with something very like an ecstatic cry. He had been on the point of kissing that too tempting mouth, but he checked himself for tender conscience' sake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a very long passage.
Sorry, I fumbled throughout that.
No, that was fine. That was a great reading. It's interesting. Did anyone watch the Polanski version of this film, of this novel? Sorry, other way around.
I did.
Sarisha, do you remember what happens? Do you remember there's a passionate embrace? Do they kiss in the film version?
Yes, I think he kissed her on the cheek, not lip to lip. And then she was like completely surprised, like, what was you doing? And he said, I'm so sorry, it is just one of those moments, and he just goes somewhere, I guess.
Is this a scene kind of where kind of Angel, is Tess willing to kiss Angel in this scene that we just read? Can we see consent in this passage or not? I think we might be able to read it, but her lips parted and she sank upon him in a momentary joy with something very like an ecstatic cry. That seems kind of very open. Nonetheless, Angel's still not sure, so he kind of checks himself for tender conscience sake. He does seem to be very cautious kind of about these things, which is really great to see in a way, which Alec, of course, is somewhat the other way around. Which brings me to the eternal question. And it kind of is a core question when it comes to romance. Why do people kiss? What's going on there? Is that a prudish question to ask? Is that just like, that's a nothing question?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? No idea.
Not touching it, Caitlin, I think. She's not going there.
I was going to say that, like, it's instinctual, isn't it? There's no real explanation besides that it's like a desired thing, whether it be with a lover or, when you want to kiss a child, or, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I was like, oh, maybe I should Google it.
There's a very famous passage of a kiss gone wrong in the Canterbury Tales, where a woman puts her backside out of a window and the man starts smooching it. In a lot of has anyone? I don't think it's happened to me, and maybe I shouldn't ask it because it's not the right question. But we often see in films people trying to kiss people, and the other person's like, "What are you doing? I don't want that kiss." Often kisses will be intuitive, but there does seem to be a very dynamic kind of iteration between the kisser and the kissee, or the kissers. It has to go on for it to be an intuitive kind of process, but often it can just be kind of, spoken. Do you mind if I kiss you? Well, yes, you can kiss me. Kissing's bizarre because, as I mentioned earlier on in one of our sessions, bees do it, ants do it. It's called Trospolaxis. Even primates do it. They exchange kind of honey, or they exchange honeydew if it's ants. And they do it so they know that they're either friend or foe. So kissing has like a very, very deep-seated kind of, it's kind of rooted in our DNA. And if any of you don't believe that, your eyebrows, of course. Why do you think you have eyebrows? Anyone have any idea? They're the vestiges of your antennae. Once upon a time, you had antennae. Talking about, 50 or 60, 70, 80 million years ago, invertebrates came about before us. So, your eyebrows were once antennae, and that's why they're all soft and tender, because once you could feel things with them. Maybe I'm waffling on here, but nonetheless, I do think kind of if you are interested in teaching Tess, and interested in teaching romance and kind of issues of consent, Tess is an important novel to kind of look at. But I think what I'm going to do now is ask you guys, because I want to continue talking about realism and consent, and I want to ask you guys to read one chapter from Tess, chapter 11, The Scene in the Chase. And I want to ask you guys to closely read it and to consider the following questions. What aspects of this scene would you describe as belonging to romance? Does Alec perform romance in this scene? How does Hardy use environment, symbolism, illusion, and abstract dialogue to represent what occurs towards the close of this scene? Is what occurs in this scene represented very clearly? So I'll keep this slide up here, and I'll just open the chat, and I will upload the reading for you guys. So I've got it in a Word document somewhere here. Stop me talking for a while and get you guys reading, which I think is important. Can you? No, I sent it directly to Camille. One moment. Why do I always do that? I think I know why. Can you guys all see that now? Should be uploading there. Thumbs up. Thanks, Amber. Thanks for the thumbs up. Can you guys download that and read the chapter and try to answer these questions? What aspects in this scene would you describe as belonging to romance? Is it a romantic scene in terms of the style of representation? Does Alec behave like a romantic type of character? And how does Hardy use the environment to represent what's going on in this scene? Because it's kind of a pivotal scene to what happens, of course, to Tess. Is it clear? Do we know what's going on? I'll give you guys, I think I'll give you guys, it's about a 2,500 word chapter. So it's not a long chapter. It's only about 3 to 4 pages, I think, or maybe, 3 to 4 pages in book form. It's 7:08 now. Let's come back at 7:30 and see if we can answer those questions as a group. Does that sound like a plan? Cool. How are we going? Have I given you too much time? Jamie said in the chat that I gave you too much time. It was good for me because I can't read properly. Oh, you can read fine, Caitlin. You're just playing Curtin Earnshaw for a moment.
No, I have this problem where I'll read, but then my brain is thinking, and then I have to go, shite, I don't know what's just happened, so I'll reread it, but then the same thing happens again. And that's just like a cycle. So I have to sit there being like, focus. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, that's common actually. Well, it's not common, but I have the same problem. I remember having that where you read and your mind wanders off, and then you return to what you're reading.
Start again.
You think thoughts, and then the thoughts start thinking, and you kind of drift off.
Yeah.
Olivia, did you get through it?
Yeah, I did.
Cool. All right. I'm hoping we've got some good answers to these questions. Is this in any way a scene that contains aspects of romance? Tropes or things you'd associate with romance? Anyone want to jump in? I don't know, I feel like I need to select people. But Amber, you had your thumbs up. What aspects of romance do we find in this scene?
Apologies for my son's really loud YouTube playing next to me. But to be honest, I found this is one of like the most romantic scenes, which is kind of weird because you feel like it shouldn't be. It's really like conflicting, this whole scene, because you know he's not a good guy. But if you didn't have the context around it and this was the only scene you read, you wouldn't really think he was a bad guy because he's helping her, he's doting on her, he's asking her questions, he's trying to comfort her, he's making her a bed of flowers to sleep on.
Flowers.
You know, it's just so romantic in its, I guess, undertones. Yeah.
Anyone kind of, what about, Amber mentioned the general kind of spirit of the scene. What about the setting? Is the setting quite romantic? To give you some backdrop, Tess has just been attacked by the Queen of Spades. Queen of Spades, or maybe it's Dark Car, they're walking home from a wild party at night in the town of Beverbury, I think it is, and maybe it's Chaseborough. It's Chaseborough. And the Dark Car, one of them has this pot of, it's not honey, it's, what's that stuff that's kind of like honey? Treacle. And the pot's broken and the treacle all goes down her neck, and Tess makes the mistake of laughing at her. And she's like, right, no one laughs at me. I'm like the queen bee around here. I'm gonna really. And then Angel comes along and he kind of puts her on his steed and they ride off. Where do they go? Is it a beautiful place? Or is it spooky?
I mean,
it's a little bit romantic in like the gothic sense, to be honest. Like it's kind of dark and mysterious, and there's lots of moon, comments about moon and fog and stuff like that.
So the moon is out. Yeah, the moon is out.
Yeah.
I think the moon might disappear at some stage, a bit later on in the narrative. Where do they go, Camille?
They go into what's called the Chase, I believe, which is like an old forest. And they kind of get lost in there.
It's not just any chase, it's the oldest wood in all of England.
Oh, wow.
So it's an enchanted forest with big yew trees and kind of, it's a very kind of romantic space. They go there. Alec is on horseback. Tess kind of asks him to slow down. He slows down. Does Alec perform romance in any way? Caitlin,
Yeah.
you're nodding. Camille?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut anyone off. But he's very chivalrous and like, he's caring for Tess and in a lot of ways, and making sure that she's okay.
He what does he do? Like, what does he do that kind of you associate with kind of being a gentleman, I guess?
I think.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You go.
No, I'm done.
This is
sorry. I guess one of the acts that he performs, attempts to perform, is like where like they're riding on the horse and he's like, "Let me hold you so you don't fall." He tries to be all chivalrous like that, but it's just like, bro, yeah, absolutely railed because we know what's happened. It's like later on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
It's a
we know
weird thing
what
he
happened.
suggests. I don't know if the Victorians had a love for this word or not, but he says, "Let me clasp you. Why won't you let me clasp you?" Which I kind of think of one of, those people that pick up rubbish with the sticks that kind of have the claw on the end, like a clasp. And I actually do know a lot about invertebrate biology, and there are what called in dragonflies genital claspers, which are these horrible things that dragonflies have to kind of clasp onto other dragonflies. Ren says sounds sexy. Well, in a way, it is very sexy, Ren's, but not in the way kind of it's vexed, but it's also has a lot to do with sex. What else does he do? What else does this guy do? So he tries to support Tess. By the way, is there a bit of an ambiguity about the way Tess is kind of leaning on him? What's Tess's psychology at the moment in this scene? She's been working all day, right? Is she quite alert?
She's exhausted. So Heidi goes into great details of her reasoning for leaning on him, and hence why when he goes to put his arms around her, she straight away goes on the defense and pulls back because she's just exhausted from working 5 days a week, I think it was, on her feet all day, and then that's 1 o'clock in the night now. And then the slow trotting, it just kind of reminded her how tired she actually is.
Yeah, great point, Lawari. Tess is really tired. She's exhausted. She's been working all day, and she went to this, she's been up all week, and she had to go to this stupid market because she needed to buy some stuff. And then she had to wait around for these people who aren't really her friends to go home because it's unsafe to go home because bloody Alex wandering around on his horse. That's what he's doing. He's wandering around on his horse. He went up to Tess earlier and said, "Hey, do you want to ride home?" And she's like, "No, I'd rather wait for my friends who aren't really my friends so I can get out of this hellhole that is the Chase Burrow." And then she's totally exhausted. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's 1:30 in the morning, and she's been up since 6. A lot of people got up at sunrise during this period. So she's very tired. And if you read Tess closely, this will happen again later on. Alec will stalk her while she's working on this machine called a fresher. And she'll be so exhausted, she just gives in to him because she's so tired. This doesn't happen this time. The other time, it's just complete exhaustion. So Alec kind of, does he do anything like Tess is cold? So what does Alec do?
Gives him...
I put it in the chat, the line, he pulled off a light overcoat that he had worn and put it around her tenderly, which is, very romantic.
Thanks, Jamie. Sorry, I didn't see that. Yeah. Is it romantic? I don't know. Like, it's become romantic. Is it a bit kind of, I don't know. Do people still do that? The other night it was quite cold and I had a jacket on. And I was like, no way, I'm not giving that to anyone. That's my jacket. Am I just a douchebag or something? Or is that,
Yeah.
Bring your own jacket. Bring your own jacket. It's cold outside. You should have been prepared.
That's pretty funny.
I would never have kind of been in this scenario in that place because I don't hang around on horseback at dances and things. Is there something weird about Alec's romance as well? Does he do something really incongruous all the way between this? Does he do something that, say, Mr. Darcy does with Elizabeth that kind of forms a very central kind of mechanism to the plot advancing in Pride and Prejudice?
What?
Do
Yes,
you
Camille.
mean about how he kind of saved her family?
Yeah. Does
Yeah.
Alec do a similar thing? And is that very weird? Does it kind of come out of like, whoa, why would you be doing that right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
It's so
it comes across
calculated.
very creepy, especially like the toys for the kids. Like it just, I guess maybe just reading that through a modern lens, it just comes across as very creepy.
It is creepy because he's like taken her away to this wood deep in the forest and very calculated. It shows intent. And then he kind of turns upon her, gives her his jacket and says, oh, and by the way, I bought your family a horse and I gave you like little brothers and sisters toys.
So gross.
Kind of, why does he do that? What's going on in this narrative that's kind of concurrent to the whole performance of romance?
I don't know. To me, look, it just sounds like he's justifying his actions. So you should allow me to do what I'm going to do. I'm attempting to do to you. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird, and kind of Amber's mentioned coercion. Caitlin's mentioned forcing bonds. Is he trying to guilt trip Tess?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And does he do that earlier when does she push him off the horse or hit him or something? Ren's kind of mentioned or suggested something around this issue.
Yeah.
Does she give him a smack? Like, does she kind of tell him to stop clasping me?
Stop clasping me. Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I can't with that whole dragon.
If we look at the very beginning of the passage,
she gives him high.
Tess, why do you always dislike my kissing you? What does she say in reply?
Because you gross.
Because I don't love you or something.
She's pretty blunt, right? She's, dude, I don't like you.
Yeah.
And this kind of
Wonderful.
seems to recur throughout the entire kind of romance of this scene, where Alec tries pretty much every type of kind of romantic trick in the book. And every time she's like, don't touch me, let me off the horse. Why have you taken me here? What the hell's going on? I bought you a horse. Don't you love me now? I bought your little brothers and sisters toys. Don't you love me now? No, I don't. I'm grateful to you. So Alec kind of performs romance. And I think in a way he's kind of forcing bonds. In a way, yes, he's kind of, there is this intent. Perhaps there is this implication as well, that if you go through the ritual of romance, that's enough. Now for the third question, how does Hardy use the environment, symbolism, illusion, and abstract dialogue to what occurs next? Does he represent the assault kind of directly?
No.
Remember we read that passage, his essay, Candor in English Fiction, where he talked about the problem of censorship? Amber says not really. Would you care to elaborate, Amber, on kind of how he goes about representing kind of what's...
He does it through the narrator, really. I guess there's like, I guess the actions are leading up. You can feel it building towards something. And then the narrative, like the conversation just stops, and then it just goes into the narrator kind of discussing, I guess, yeah, like that sentence, it was to be, kind of being like, it's done now. You feel like a bit of hopelessness, like there's nothing you can do about it. It's happened.
Yeah. I think the last three paragraphs kind of, think of the first sentence in the third paragraph from the end. Darkness and silence ruled everywhere around. Darkness and silence ruled everywhere around. Above them rose the primeval yews and the oaks of the chase, in which there poised gentle roosting birds in their last nap, and about them stole the hopping rabbits and hares. But might some say, where was Tessa's guardian angel? Where was the providence of her simple faith? perhaps like that other god of whom the ironical Tishbite spoke, he was talking, or he was pursuing, or he was in a journey, or he was sleeping and not to be awaked. There's a whole lot of questioning that gets asked towards the end. Rhetorical questions seem to do a lot of work here. What about the symbolism of the horse? Horses are often a symbol of power. What happens to the horse at the end of this scene, or kind of towards the close?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember now. Why was it is beautiful?
Does it kind of have any kind of symbolism, perhaps? Does the horse kind of, is it nearby?
It's pretty far away, isn't it? From what I remember, it's pretty far away.
What about the fog? What might the fog be doing here? Because the fog kind of creeps in. Camille mentioned that it is a moonlit night, but it slowly gets foggier and foggier. Is the fog kind of working to kind of symbolize anything, perhaps?
Yes, I think maybe it's like a metaphor for something secretive happening.
Maybe kind of like how he's confused by her, like personality or lack of interest in him. Like it's just kind of becoming more confusing and more hazy for him.
Could the fog just be a narrative device, perhaps to kind of just blur kind of what's about to take place? It is becoming it's becoming very blurry what's going on there. One might indeed admit the possibility of a retribution lurking in the present catastrophe. Doubtless some of Tess d'Urberville's mailed ancestors, rollicking home from a fray, had dealt the same measure even more ruthlessly towards peasant girls of their time. Is that pretty direct?
Where am I reading that?
Does that, it's direct, but it implies something, perhaps? These medieval knights coming back from some war see a peasant girl and dealt the same measure even more ruthlessly.
Where is that? Where am I reading that? Oh, okay. That measure.
But though to visit the sins of the fathers upon the children, has anyone heard of that phrase before? The sins of the.
Yep.
What does it mean? The sins of the father
upon the children.
I believe it's sort of like a more religious idea of like hereditary traits. Like you know, you have these mistakes or these things that happen to your ancestors, and they pass it on. And like what the mistakes of your ancestors will be your burden, or you'll make the same mistakes.
Yep.
One of the big problems that religion has, when you think about religion, whether you have faith or however you think about it, is how to explain the existence of evil in the world, or what kind of philosophers call theodicy. How do you explain the fact that children are born with terminal cancer that is very painful? How do you explain a universe that kind of has things happen that are completely horrible to people in a certain way? A lot of Christian moralists, kind of historically going back all the way to St. Augustine, would say, the reason why your child has terminal illness, it's because the parents had committed sins, and the sins passed on not to the parents, but to the children. Hardy seems to be kind of contemplating, how on earth are we to moralize about this event? How do we explain it in terms of the idea of an omnipotent deity that would allow such a thing to happen in the universe? He mentions it in the other rhetorical questions above it. Where does simple faith go kind of in scenes like this? It may be a morality good enough for divinities. It is scorned by average human nature, and it therefore does not mend the matter. And all we're left really is this kind of fatalism that Tess's kind of people have, that horrible things happen and we just need to bear it. Is the event clear? Is what happens here clear? Can we kind of decide, after reading this, that Tess was raped or seduced?
It's definitely not a seduction. It's definitely not a seduction at all. We can definitely. Oh my goodness.
Personally, I don't know. I don't feel like it is super clear, but that could just be me and me not understanding it properly. But for me, I don't think it is.
I think perhaps it's intentionally made very ambiguous by Hardy. But for me personally, I think it's fairly clear what's inferred here. Although, to your point, Olivia, I think Hardy's trying to make it unclear to kind of make the situation seem ambiguous.
Yeah.
It's definitely inferred, but it's definitely not as clear as what it could be if he was really just trying to go for it.
Which is probably not ideal.
You'd say it's a bit foggy.
Oh,
yes.
I like that one.
Yes, it's very foggy. And to the point, Camille, there's that environment working there. In a way, working there. The horse, the power kind of disappears. It gets very ambiguous. You have all of these abstract kind of dialogues about the nature of the universe, whether it's good or evil, what's going on there.
No idea.
Nonetheless, though, I think you can kind of see what occurs here, because in the lead up, is consent kind of granted by Tess at any of these kind of romantic moments of embrace?
That's what I was going to say. I know, like, from a modern lens, you can look at it and say it's quite clear what's happening, because at no point does Tess go, maybe. Like, she's very clear. No, never. I don't love you. No. So I think it is quite clear from your previous question, like, she does not want that at all.
No. Yes. That's what I mean, it's kind of, it's, even though the actual event cannot be represented because of issues to do with censorship, Hardy kind of creates a sequence of dialogue in which Alex repeatedly told no. He avoids all of the no's and devises a strategy by which Tess falls asleep, basically, and he comes upon her while she's asleep. And a lot of the historical rape cases, and I believe I've got a reading on Collaborate to do with representations of rape during the period, that were kind of rape by surprise when one was sleeping. Suddenly they'd wake up and someone was upon them, which seems to be what kind of happens here at the very end of the scene.
Chris,
I think, yes.
I was just going to say, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but sorry, just going back about the fog. Was the fog like a representation? This is what I thought, a representation of how she is feeling and seeing, because obviously she's not sure what's going on, and that's why she went to her mum and was upset and angry at her for not telling her what these men are really like.
Yeah, I think it can be read that way as well, definitely, because if you look at it from Tessa's perspective, her vision is completely impaired. And also later on, if you think about the moon and what the moon symbolizes, and the way Angel will romanticize Tess as being Artemis, often associated with Selene, the goddess of the moon, but also Artemis would be represented with a little moon crescent on her forehead. Artemis was the goddess of virginity and kind of women, and kind of animals as well, and innocence. The moon gets completely blurred out there. So Tess kind of becomes completely blurry in that sense. Is anyone, when you read that, a little angry that Hardy couldn't be a bit more direct?
Yeah.
In a way, because like something wrong is obviously happening, but because it's so vague and foggy, it's difficult to actually say, like, oh, like, what's happened, what's going on. Like, it's hard to criticize it when it's not explicit.
I feel like it ought to have been, I don't know.
It is a bit enraging, but I think it's very typical. We'll speak about this. We'll have a break and then come back to looking at kind of the culture in which this kind of horrible event occurred in. But ambiguity and the whole idea that consent isn't clear because of the way it's represented, it is a bit enraging. It's also enraging when you think about Hardy can represent kind of pretty much every aspect of flora and fauna. I mean, we just saw a scene of him speeding up time kind of 20 minutes ago, speeding up time, or a bit longer ago, sorry, so that he could represent the flow of the seasons. Why couldn't he kind of represent this with a bit more precision? Kind of begs the question, I'd say, because of the society, most likely. I think I should mention, maybe we'll have a break in a moment because we've been going for quite a while. This edition you're reading now, this chapter, this was the more explicit one. Originally, when Thomas Hardy tried to publish this chapter, the publisher refused to publish it. He published it in a serial called The Graphic, which was a progressive serial, and they said, no, you can't do this. You need to make Tess marry Alec now. They have to have a little arranged marriage so that kind of things work out a bit better. And the reason why is because they wanted to frame it more as a seduction than as an assault, so that it was more palatable to consumers during the period when they read it. This was a much later version when Hardy got the chance to write his own kind of version. So even though this is ambiguous, the original one that got first published was even more ambiguous because readers just wouldn't tolerate it. The publisher refused to print it unless he changed a few things. What's the time? 7:51. Do you mind if we have a 15-minute break? I'm feeling like we need a break after that.
Yeah.
So let's have a 15-minute break and return at, let's just turn 7:52. So let's return at 8:07. Cool, thumbs up. Let's have a break. Do you guys have breaks in other kind of block classes? You must have, right? It's quite a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I kind of feel like I'm not getting enough information across, but I kind of feel like maybe I'm slave driving or something and getting too much information across.
No.
Break for the trouble is they never tell me what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. So I might ask you guys at the end what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, sorry about the internet glitch.
Yeah. What can you do?
Oh, but it hasn't happened
happens.
for ages, so I
Yeah.
think it's all resolved.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I think it was? Well, you don't. Sorry. I hate it when people do that. You know, they go, do you know what I think? You can take a guess if you'd like, but that's not why I was doing it, which is the annoying thing of why I was saying that.
So funny.
I think my housemate was playing this online game in the lounge room, and that was sucking up the internet.
What game is it?
Which, yeah.
What game is it? If you don't mind me asking.
It's like this game where they're on this island and they run around shooting each other. I don't know what it's called.
Is it Fortnite? Because my son plays that.
It'd be PUBG if it's online.
No, I kind of when they get shot, they turn blue crystals, and at the moment there's these blimps or something kind of.
I think in Fortnite they turn blue when they die.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I reckon it's Fortnite.
Yeah, you guys better not be. You better not be playing it while the class is on, because I knew some students were doing that kind of in another one. Yeah.
My very first assessment when I started this course was to make a video learning something new, and I don't play Fortnite, but I learned how to do the Fortnite dance, the Belle Biv DeVoe one, Turk's dance, if anyone knows. I had to make a YouTube video about it if anyone wants to see it. It's pretty funny.
Yep, please share.
Yeah, okay.
Oh my God, I love this. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm so excited to hear it.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm a bit. I saw Caitlin's video because she recorded one kindly for a presentation.
Yeah,
And I saw on the YouTube page that there's recordings of our classes, and I was a bit mortified, a bit worried about those. To be honest with you.
Nah. What are you worried about? They're great.
I don't know. I might get hauled in, kind of, and they'll be like, "Look at this. You call that teaching?"
Oh my gosh, that's so hilarious.
And for this assessment,
No, don't worry. We'll come in and storm VU and save you. Don't worry.
Nah, you'll have like a whole PowerPoint presentation with graphics and stats. Here he rambles for 45 minutes, unaware that he's glitching. I want my money back.
Oh god.
I think like the trouble with this unit is it's a very short unit, but it's an introduction to a big historical period. So I think the key is to just kind of remind everyone that this is just an introduction to a period of literature, particularly those who are really interested in it. Because if you're really interested in it, and we'll talk about this at the very end of the unit, there are a lot of avenues for you to kind of follow up, like join societies, continue studying elsewhere. Maybe just think of this as a very brief introduction to kind of the period of 19th century fiction. Yeah, that's one of my greatest fears, is that it puts people off reading, which is the worst kind of thing of all.
I actually think it does the opposite, to be honest, because we get such great snapshots of what these books are about and what you can get out of them, essentially. And if you're not able to read it, I find that you end up doing more learning, or most of your learning, when the unit is over, and when you have the time, you go in and you start digging about into all of those things that get spoken about in the class that you weren't able to be as present for.
Well, yeah, that's a good thing. And what I'm hoping with Lady Chatterley's Lover as well, because a lot of you will notice that it's kind of chucked in at the very end, and you're probably not going to have, except for one or two of you who are writing your essays on Lady Chatterley's Lover, you're probably not going to be like, well, why should I even bother about Lady Chatterley's Lover, because it's not on the test and I'm not writing my essay about the novel. But a good deal of literature, the whole point of it isn't to test you on it. It's like it exists for you to enjoy it. So hopefully I can kind of persuade you to read on over the Easter break, and hopefully it kind of ignites some interest in those novels. I do think by the time we get to modernism, it's like a breath of fresh air, because the Victorians are a bit dour. They're a bit kind of like
dour.
They're a bit, they're uptight. They've got to stiff up a lip. There's kind of they're a bit severe. When you get to modernism, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's entering a new world.
Okay, I'm gonna get some tea. I'm gonna go get some tea.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. How long have we got? I've still got 9 minutes. I'll do that as well.
Nice. Oh, just really quickly, Olivia, if you're there, can you add me on Animal Crossing?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Oh, bless. Okay, hold on. Oh my goodness gracious. How are you going, Chris?
Good. I'm just worried about what we're going to be able to get through in the remainder of the time we've got. But let's see what we can get through. I like giving everyone a break because I feel like people need breaks in these sessions. But I'm a bit frazzled, to be honest. How are you going? How's your essay shaping up?
Yeah, good. That
was a demonic little laugh. That was like the laugh of an evil panda.
Oh, bless. Well, that's just her usual day-to-day laugh, so there you go. No, I'm joking. No, that is the laugh of someone who hasn't started yet. Woo! I've been working, Chris. I'm sorry. But I'm going to smash it tomorrow. Don't you stress.
Are you going to smash it? Yes. General kind of suggestion to everyone, perhaps if we're all there, we can reconvene. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Maybe we can just chat now until the time elapses, but start as early as you can because, kind of the earlier you can get into it and get writing, kind of the more time you'll give yourself to edit and kind of rethink things. So start as early as possible. But I do understand people have jobs because they have to pay and kind of buy things to survive. It's not like we can go and pick our fruit off trees that grow in our gardens anymore.
I mean, eating is pretty good. Let's be honest. So is having a roof over your head, electricity, there's some good stuff there that comes with having a job.
Oh, yes. The trouble is the jobs and the education are always in conflict, and I can't really tell you guys not to prioritize one over the other, but I can say, write a really good essay and put it whatever time you have into writing your essay. They can be very rewarding. I like to think of them as not something, Caitlin, you need to smash out, but like a beautiful sculpture you need to sculpt and create and kind of bring alive and refine down.
Make a little love. Write essays tonight. I don't know why, but when you were when you were just describing the essay writing process, it reminded me of that song like that. Do a little dance. Make a little love. Yeah, and I just I'm going to put that song on when I write later to inspire me.
This is so random, but it's literally been on my mind since last unit. In the second class or something like that, you called this juice. This is my water bottle. I just wanted to clarify this. This is not a liter of juice. This is a liter of water. I don't know why it's been on my mind, and I don't know why I wanted to clarify it, but it's
I can't remember that, but
I do.
Sorry for mistaking your juice for water.
I remember it too. I was so jealous. I was like, I would crush a liter of juice.
Yeah.
Juice is good.
Absolutely. You just went to the shops and bought Love it.
I'm glad someone else remembers that because, I don't know why I do, but I just, wanted to clarify that I'm definitely not drinking a liter of juice this late at night.
Oh, no. I must have said, what is that, juice or something? Camille, did you remember that? Because I can't remember that juice
I remember
comment.
this as well.
Yeah, I remember.
I remember it too.
I think because it's orange.
Making it up.
I remember it too.
It's funny what you remember, isn't it?
Yeah, we have selective memories, I've been told. I do have a good memory, but sorry, Olivia, but that's not gonna stay in my memory. That's why I got rid of that memory, mistaking your water for juice. It's not as important.
Okay.
Yeah, a good thing to remember. Soleil, sorry.
Wasn't it when you were picking people to read and you were like, oh, Olivia's ready to go. She's got a big thing of juice to like hydrate before she...
Exactly.
I'm so glad this stuck in other people's memories. That makes me feel like so good.
Oh God. Well, I was trying to justify asking you to read, and you had the resources to assist in your reading. You weren't going to get a dry throat. Yeah, but yeah, I apologize about that. Mistaking the juice for water. Shall we get back into it and see what we can get through? This part of the session gets a bit controversial because I'm going to be talking about, we just read a passage that has a lot to do with rape, basically. Now we're going to look at the culture surrounding Tess and the way it kind of functions to deal with that in a way that somewhat silences what actually goes on in terms of the kind of the narrative itself. So let's begin again. So let's start back up. I want to kind of read Tess in the light of what you would call a rape culture, basically. And I want to kind of make an argument about why Tess of the D'Urbervilles is a very important novel in the way it kind of represents a culture that allows rapes to occur and then sets about trying to justify or naturalize or deny their existence as a problem. Hardy was one of the first to kind of show the way a horrible event like a rape can occur, and then the various cultural means by which that trauma gets silenced and often projected onto the victim herself. So Tess is a very important, but it's also a very vexed novel. So I'll talk about what seems to be very important and poignant about the novel, and then mention some of the problems to do with the representation of Tess. So Hardy delineates with very sympathetic realism how rape cultures function to sustain modes of patriarchal oppression. Tess's victimization, which finds articulation in the novel in nearly all of the domains of life: economic victimization, environmental victimization, sexual victimization, romantic, physical, emotional, political, legal, social. Pretty much Tess is kind of conflicted and constricted everywhere she kind of moves in this novel. It's kind of detailed with much clarity. So the novel's power kind of, and I would make an argument that you couldn't really kind of not teach Tess of the D'Urbervilles when you're looking at 19th century realism, is both historical, but it's also of contemporary relevance in foregrounding a network of recurrent behaviors that haven't really gone away. Things like stalking related to predation, economic entrapment, the encoding of certain spaces as masculine, the romanticization of both benevolent and malevolent sexism. We'll look at that in a moment, along with the process of transforming the victim into the perpetrator of the crime itself, which is actually acted on them. So victim blaming. So in a way, when we look at the plotting of Tess and what it actually does after this event, it's not just about one traumatic event that occurs in Tess's life. It narrates the various cultural means by which that event occurs and by which society kind of tries to cover up that event and deal with it. So it's very important in that respect, but in one sense, Hardy might be seen as guilty as aestheticizing the scene in The Chase, constructing Tess as a type of seductress without any subjectivity, presenting her as a traditional fallen woman, as a passive vessel of emotionalized submissiveness to the point of her own irrationality, and as a character whose apparent purity derives from her not being able to have any sexual agency whatsoever. So Tess being a pure woman, being someone who is a complete victim, seems to be related to the fact that she can't actually have any sexual desire in the novel. And we'll see a complete different kind of form of sexual agency when we look at Lady Chatterley's lover later on. But so there's a lot of kind of progressive ideology and what you would call basically feminism in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, particularly when it comes to this horrible thing called a rape culture. But at the same time, there are all of these issues that are kind of tied to that. I want to give you a definition of what I mean by a rape culture. It's a very kind of austere, a very horrible sounding term. It's probably the weirdest juxtaposition you'll find in the English language, because culture is supposed to be this thing called sweetness and light, the pursuit of perfection. It's the arts, it's what all the good things do. When you kind of bring a horrible form of sexual coercion next to culture, it grates upon the mind. Basically, if we had a simple definition of a rape culture, it would be an environment in which rape is prevalent and in which sexual violence against women is normalized and excused in the media, but also in popular culture. Perhaps a much more simpler way of describing a rape culture is in any culture in which rape occurs and the victim receives no justice. But the term rape culture it's not just about the physical activity of sexual assault and rape. It also explains the presence of eroticized violence within sexuality more broadly. Sex and violence seem to be kind of connected to each other, particularly in patriarchal culture. And it's a very kind of big question to ask, is why so much violence is associated with sexuality. So when we're looking at a rape culture, we're looking at a kind of network of events, the engendering of certain spaces as masculine, the normalization of both aggressive and benevolent sexism, the naturalizing of sexual aggression as masculine, the transformation of consent into this ambiguous phenomenon. Consent should be really clear. Would you like a hot dog? Yes, I would like a hot dog. What's ambiguous about that? When it comes to issues of consent in sexual relationships, rape cultures often render them extremely ambiguous. And we kind of see that in that scene in The Chase. You wonder, why can't Hardy just be clear? He could infer this in a more direct manner as well, but he doesn't. He brings in the fog. He renders things a lot ambiguous. Victim blaming, that still hasn't gone away, but also further the promotion of cultural silence. You'll see this in a moment when we look at the way the villagers around Tess react to her rape. Cool. So in one way, we see kind of the way silence occurs in Tess. By the way, Tess has no real economic power. She's kind of bonded to Alec, this patriarchal figure. Does Tess really have a say in why she has to go to Trantridge? No, she doesn't. What is she employed to do there? Does anyone know what Tess's job is at Trantridge?
It's a chicken.
Might be getting confused, but isn't it to work with the birds or something like that?
Yeah. It's a very weird job, and we might like to wonder why Hardy kind of created this weird scenario. And if you look at some of the passages about Alec invents this job for her as basically this kind of chicken wrangler. She has to go and pick up the hens and the game pheasants and take them to show Alec's mother, who's blind. It does seem a very absurd kind of relationship. Who is her employer, basically? It's Alec, right? So Alec is her boss, as well as someone who's kind of very keen to get intimate with her. I think we've discussed that in terms of what Alec promises Tess's family in The Chase. We kind of, they get a horse. Does this same situation repeat itself later in the novel in terms of economics and the way Tess is somewhat entrapped with Alec?
Say that again.
Does Alec go away after the first kind of attack on Tess?
No.
What happens? How do they re-meet, and what goes on there?
Doesn't he stalk her?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Later on, yeah. Sarisha, you were about to say something, I think.
Yes, I was thinking about once I think Angel here, when he left to South America, and she just felt like she doesn't have any help, and she went to his parents, they are not helpful. So she left with, she has to work. And then at that point, I think, what's his name? Alec. He came and he said like, I'll take you as like, I can provide everything. You can just come with me. But she refused it.
Yeah, she runs into Alec. Does anyone know what Alec does after? Does he ever move? Does he ever have a moral response to what he's been doing? Because Tess isn't the first. Of course, he's done it to other servants as well before Tess. He's a repeat offender who hasn't been punished at all. Does he kind of have some moral revelation and wake up to himself?
Does he?
To those of you who are probably doing the essay, this might be an easier kind of on Tess of the D'Urbervilles.
I haven't read that far.
Does Alec wake up to himself? Is that what you asked?
Yeah. Does he have some type of religious or moral conversion?
I feel like he does he?
I don't think so. Not the what I can remember.
I think
he does become a preacher, but I don't know if you would say that he wakes up to himself, because he goes right back into what he was.
Yeah. To Olivia's point, he doesn't really, and to Jamie's point, he doesn't really, but he actually, it's rather ironic because Angel's father encounters Alec, and I think Alec actually, this is a bit spooky thinking of the Oscars, I think Alec actually slaps Angel's father, who's trying to kind of preach to him and convert him. But Alec has this Baptist revelation, and he's, I've been a sinner, I'm going to be born again, I'm not backsliding now, I've been this horrible person, it's not going to be me anymore. And he's becoming morally upright, but then he runs into Tess, and she's just so desirable that he kind of just becomes this wretched person again, who, as Sarisha mentions, and as Olivia mentions, he starts preying upon Tess. He starts following her around. He appears at her work. He won't leave her alone. And he basically just keeps saying to her, I'll give you money. I'll give you lots of money. Another question, kind of, does anyone care about Tess throughout the novel? Angel, of course, abandons her after he discovers that Tess had sex before marriage, even though it was unwilling. Who can we say cares about Tess?
I feel like
there are people that care about her.
Family, maybe family.
But sorry, go ahead, Suresh. Sorry, Kendall. I was thinking about one of her friend, Marian, I think her name.
Yes, yeah, Marian. Izzy, kind of, they all the dairymaids care about her, and they come into the narrative like as it gets worse and worse. They're the only people that stand up for Tess. I think there's a really horrible scene where Angel kind of proposes to one of them and goes, why don't you come away with me to South America? And her friend says, I'd like to do it, but I would do it, but I can't love you any more than Tess loves you. Kind of the only people that seem to be able to understand Tess's predicament and care about her aren't so much her family, although her mother kind of, there's a bond there for sure, and her little brothers and sisters as well. The only people that can really understand her predicament are her friends. The entire economic system kind of seems to be geared against her, though. Sexual predation. Throughout the entire narrative of Tess, the economic space kind of outside of the home tends to be fairly masculinized. You particularly see this when Tess is on the road. Tess will often be objectified by men, and she's definitely animalized by Alec. Alec kind of views her as a type of woman/animal thing. There are scenes at Trantridge where he's literally staring at her through the chicken wire in the coops and watching her as though she was some type of chicken. Tess is clearly stalked by Alec early in the novel, but also towards the end of the novel. The chase itself is this kind of historical dominion that's supposed to grant certain men kind of exclusive hunting rights. Tess's mobility throughout the entire narrative is impeded by unwelcome gestures, comments and proposals from men, does anyone remember did anyone find the character Farmer Groby kind of the worst of all the male characters, perhaps even worse than Alec, or is that going too far?
Oh, I don't know.
Does anyone remember Farmer Groby? He labels Tessa a prostitute to someone kind of during the narrative. He encounters her on the road as well, and then kind of asks her to admit that she's a prostitute, which is kind of even more horrible. Do we also see, because economic space or the environment where women can move in this novel is totally masculinized, it's deemed a space for men to move around. Does anyone kind of know of any kind of spaces where, the way Tess reacts to constantly being kind of complimented or solicited by men? How does she react to this? Does she do anything?
Does she do anything? I don't think so. Doesn't she just...
A lot of silence here. I feel like that's a very specific question. Interestingly, if you kind of are interested, she actually cuts off her eyebrows. She disfigures herself so men will stop ogling her. So
that's so funny.
Because you've got to walk in this space where men control it, and because you're deemed desirable, the only way to deal with men is to make yourself less desirable. So she has to disfigure herself so that they won't potentially rape her. That's how extremely bad it is.
Oh my God.
Throughout Tess, men are also shown to engage in both benevolent and malevolent sexism. What might we mean when we talk about benevolent sexism? Is there such a thing as benevolent sexism, or is that an oxymoron?
A bit, yeah.
Has anyone heard of that concept, benevolent sexism? So Alec is clearly an aggressive he engages in forms of aggressive sexism, which you'd call malevolent or evil sexism. What about benevolent sexism?
Is that when you infantilize?
Is that kind of when you view women or girls as sort of weak and vulnerable, and so it's even though what you're trying to do is protect them, you're inherently biased and sexist against them because they're not able to look after themselves?
Yeah, pretty much. So Dairyman Crick, for example, who's one of the good guys in the narrative, he's nevertheless benevolently sexist towards Tess. Because she's so pretty, because she's the fairest milkmaid, he kind of tells Tess, "Oh, you don't need to do this. Let the other women do that. You don't want to harm your constitution." Men are also constantly harassing Tess, but they don't think they're harassing her. They think they're stopping to assist her as she moves about. Angel himself views Tess as something to be protected, adored, but also adorned. He gets the family jewels and kind of adorns them on them. Benevolent sexism, however kind of benign it may sound, is actually quite problematic because there's a tautological assumption embedded in the idea of benevolent sexism. And I'll throw it open to discussion in a moment, in the sense that because men assume that women need to be protected and looked after, it's a tautological argument or a circular argument in the sense that they don't actually solve the problem of why women need to be looked after. They have this idea that the world is harsh and cruel towards women. There are nasty men like Alec d'Urberville out there, and it's my job as a man to protect them. I just need to be the white knight in shining armor. And that's the way we solve this problem of patriarchy, or we solve this problem of rape, or we solve this problem of sexism. It's through being benevolent and chivalrous towards women. And you definitely see that in a lot of the good-doing characters. They're benevolently sexist. I want to throw this question open, though, to group discussion, because in a way, benevolent sexism's kind of been in the last two novels we've looked at. It's been kind of deeply embedded in Pride and Prejudice, I would say, through this idea of being a gentleman, through this idea of being chivalrous, honouring women and making sure they're protected. Very central to Fitzwilliam Darcy's protection of his sister Georgiana. You know, she must be protected from coercive rakes and roués like Wickham. Is this notion of chivalry, is it dead? Is it a thing of the past? I'm curious about this. By chivalry, I mean that gentlemanly notion that a man's kind of duty in life is to kind of uphold the weak and make sure women are protected. Is chivalry kind of, is it a relic of the past, or kind of, is it still around? I've got this picture here of The Last Duel. It's a recent film. Has anyone seen the film, The Last Duel?
No.
Made by Ridley Scott, kind of as a response perhaps to the Milwari. Have you seen this film?
No, I haven't. I've been meaning to, but I was just going to answer your question and say, yeah, I think it still exists.
I think it exists, but looks different.
How so?
Just simple kind of act of kindness, I guess, like public transport. You always see a gentleman or a man get up and offer his seat if he sees a pregnant woman, an elderly woman, of even just a woman, young woman in herself. Like I've witnessed it myself. Someone getting up and offering their seat in public transport. I know that's one example, I guess.
Yeah, I do that myself, but I do think if Caitlin was on the tram, would Caitlin get up and offer her seat to a pregnant woman or an old kind of person?
No. Nah.
No. Are you joking, Caitlin?
I'm joking. Yeah, I'm joking.
Is that like I definitely see this is what we're talking about. I'm not saying that's not being chivalrous. Is chivalry perhaps a little different, however, from courtesy?
I was going to say maybe chivalry, maybe a thing that still exists but looks a lot different, as opposed to being like this knight in shining armor. It's a man that consciously seeks a way. I don't know. Oh gosh, I'm just not great with words, but to level the playing field, to understand women's issues. I think that is chivalrous, and as opposed to like, I'm going to do everything for you. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, all right, relax. I can do it. It's all right. I don't know if anyone else has a better way of, maybe if they're thinking the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, what do you think? Maybe I'll ask Taylor, are you there? Do you think chivalry is is it a good thing? Is there good aspects to chivalry?
I think you got to be careful with it, because I think we're in an era where it's everyone judges intentions as something else.
Do you have any examples of that, Ryan?
Yep. So I said, excuse me, to a girl because I was working at the bar, and she goes, I have a boyfriend. And I go, cool. I just want to get back into the bar.
I see. So there was like a wrong interpretation of the excuse me.
Yep.
I think that's understandable though, because maybe that's a learned response that she's had to give through many experiences where she might have been, harassed, or, maybe she's just doesn't want to, you know what I mean? Like,
I was literally in a uniform that said Customs House.
It doesn't matter.
No, I agree with Ryan. I never, being a woman myself, obviously, I've never gone out of my way to make an assumption that someone is hitting on me or someone's already trying to, has the wrong intent. I always give them the benefit of the doubt. It's just maybe after a couple of seconds in a conversation, that's when I realize, no, there's different intent. Then that's probably when I get a bit defensive. But yeah, I always try to give benefit of doubt, because for example, Chris, again, catching public transport, I had a teacher, there was a class, was a teacher with a bunch of boys, and he was trying to show them how you should treat the opposite sex. And that was when it was public transport, and he got up to offer his seat, and I said, no, thank you, that's very kind of you. But he kind of did it to kind of show them, like, this is how you should be acting. So I think it kind of exists, but yeah, what Caitlin was saying, it depends.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Miwari. I also think that we need to extend that same benefit of the doubt to women who present in that way, because we just don't know why their like behaviors are always informed by something. They don't just happen for no reason. So I definitely think that it's one of those like over like umbrella-y kind of things where it applies to all, in that case.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? It's sort of that whole thing, like, not all men, that a lot of men have been saying, and that's true, it isn't all men, but in order for women to be safe, we have to be cautious of all men. Like, we can't just give men the benefit of the doubt all the time, because we have been raped, we've been murdered, we've been attacked. Like, you can't just assume people have good intentions, because so many don't.
Funny that you talk about that, because there was actually a study done, and it was doing the abuse and the fights amongst women, and they actually found that in more cases, there was more cases in abuse amongst lesbian couples.
I was actually going to say I've read the same thing, and there's higher rates of suicide and domestic violence in men, surprising.
Oh yeah, but those correlation doesn't imply causation, and like those phenomenons may be some true in a certain context, but like if you look at the statistics, and recently there was a sexual assault study done on harassment at campuses. And it found, for example, women kind of were sexually assaulted quite commonly and harassed 20% of all women at Bond University. The statistics are quite large and quite amazing. And if you look at issues to do with domestic violence, if you just look at the past kind of 3 to 5 years of kind of rapes and murders that have occurred in and around Melbourne of women, I kind of have to side with Jamie kind of in this respect, because the world we live in is not quite safe. And if I had been asked to kind of teach this class face to face at this time, like I would have said no, because I don't think the world is quite safe in that respect.
Yeah, I agree on that as well. Like, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I was just sharing my knowledge about it.
No.
I don't think right about that as well.
I don't think we're arguing, but I feel like chivalry is one of those things. I often have arguments with my grandmother about it, because my grandmother was of an epoch when chivalry was this thing that you had to perform as a man. You were told to kind of do certain things. But to return to Test of the D'Urbervilles, when we looked at that chapter, does Alec perform chivalry?
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to think that he'll get something if he just goes through the motions of performing chivalry. And that's somewhat disturbing in that respect. Chivalry seems very problematic because it's got this assumption embedded in it that women need to be protected by men. Men are the ones that do the protecting. And if you guys have like time during the Easter break, I would definitely recommend watching this film, because it's on point to do with Test of the D'Urbervilles, because it's about the last duel that occurred in the 13th or the 14th century in northern France between basically two men. The duel's about whether one man raped his wife or they didn't. But the woman doesn't really matter, because the duel's more about the honor between the men. It has nothing really to do with protecting women. It's more just about men and whether they have power and the control of women. In a way, chivalry, some feminists describe it as a racket. It's a protection racket. We use it kind of as a way to kind of pretend that we're being good, but it sustains the same problems. I always find chivalry kind of very vexed. I still think it's alive, but I think it's slowly dying, probably for the better. Chivalry is different, of course, from courtesy. I think we've discussed that. Let's look at Angel. Is not one of the more horrible aspects of Tess of the D'Urbervilles the way Angel reacts to Tessa's revelation that she was assaulted?
Yeah, I think his name is pretty much a bit ridiculous. Like, it just, he really behaves in an opposite manner. It's the cruelest part of the movie. I mean, sorry, the film and the book and then the novel.
Yeah. Sarisha, did you really come to hate Angel? Like, was it a bit of a reality check when kind of he changes his mind just after that thing?
Yes, I totally hate him because when he did the same thing and she said like, yes, I forgive you, you have to forgive me now. And he reacted the opposite way and he left her all by herself and walk away. I don't like it.
Yes. The way he responds, kind of, it's quite radical. He's so repulsed by Tess. Does anyone know what he does when she tells him? I've kind of got it there on the slide, but
What's happening?
he has to leave the room. Tess, he said, I cannot stay in this room just now. I will walk out a little way. I'm gonna vomit. You're so kind of, you know, what you've done is just kind of such a kind of horrible thing. Does he forgive her? Is forgiveness even on the table?
Nope.
What he says, he says, oh, Tess, forgiveness does not apply in the case. You were one person, now you are another. My God, how can forgiveness meet such a grotesque pre-digitization as that? The woman I have been loving is not you. It's pretty extreme, and as Camille says, it's very cruel. It's very cruel. I might ask the question kind of in a moment. Is there in a way where Tess gets raped twice?
Raped twice. Something gets taken from her. Oh. I'm not sure. When Tess gets raped twice, I don't know. I don't know.
Alec himself, does Alec does Alec suggest that Tess didn't consent to the event? Does Alec actually blame Tess for what he does?
I think so. Yeah, I think.
How so, Olivia? Like, how does he justify his behavior?
I could be getting confused, but doesn't he just like basically be like, oh, you were toying with me the whole time, like blah, 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 like you were saying no, but like your actions kind of said otherwise sort of thing? Is that what happens? Or
in a way, yes. He says that he misinterprets kind of Tess's behavior, but I kind of would remind kind of Caitlin's point before where kind of there's a lot of intent there. But when she kind of points out that, no, I didn't want this, he just essentializes and universalizes the phenomenon and says, you know, that's what all women say. Women say no, but they mean yes. No means yes in this context. Later on, Alec will blame Tess for soliciting, for asking for her own rape. So when he comes across her again, he says, you know, swear, Tess, swear you will never tempt me by your charms and ways. So Tess's mere presence in the novel kind of makes her the own agent in her own victimization. So you see this kind of in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, you see this process of transforming the victim into the perpetrator of their own crime. But society does it as well. So the men in Tess's village they lament what happens to Tess, but they also naturalize it. They view it within a type of comical register. They say, oh, it was pretty sad, but it's always the most attractive women. The plain ones be as safe as churches. Likewise, kind of other people just transform the victims. Now they're sex workers. So Father Grobby just kind of says, be honest, own it, what I said in town was true. Though your fancy man was so up about it, hey, my sly one. So Farmer Grobby starts viewing Tess as basically a sex worker. Let's talk, in the time we've got remaining, a little bit about Angel. What is Angel's problem? Why does he react so kind of repulsively towards Tess when she tells him about this traumatic event?
Because he's like all gung-ho about religion and shit like that. Like that's why he reacted. Well, sorry. That's why he reacted the way he did. Because he's like, raised, because his father's a whatever he is. Really religious. Anyways, I'm just chalking it up to religion. Sorry.
Yeah, chalking it up to religion. Is that the general kind of agreement? Is it a religious response? I can't help but I apologize to anyone who has religious beliefs, and I don't have anything against religious beliefs. Christianity, Islam, kind of Buddhism. I don't think this is what's actually going on in Tessa D'Urberville's. I don't think it's a novel actually aggressive towards spirituality and faith. It's more the institutionalization and social kind of the way it gets projected upon people in terms of how they kind of view morality. Is Angel's problem just religion?
All right, I meant to preface, not just religion, it's also like from a societal standpoint, women should be pure and stuff like that. Yeah.
There's this, they kind of go hand in hand in a way, because like religion kind of does the purifying, but there is definitely this idea that women should kind of be pure. But as Sarisha mentioned, there's a double standard there completely, because a poor Angel was seduced by an older woman when he went to the city for 48 hours. It must have been quite a night in Sodom for poor Angel, and how he suffered. One of the big problems with Angel is that he completely romanticizes Tess. He objectifies her, but he also idolizes her. He kind of views her as this child of nature, this romantic creature. He describes her as being pure, chaste, virginal. He likens her to Artemis. Why Artemis? I'm always trying to talk about Artemis. Why would Angel liken Tess to Artemis, the Greek goddess?
Yeah, of chastity, right?
Sorry, like you mentioned, she's symbol for virginity of woman.
Yeah, she's the goddess of chastity and virginity and kind of all things non-sexual. Anyone who knows about the story of Artemis and Actaeon knows that you don't try to get it on with Artemis, that's for sure. If Alec tried it on with Artemis, he'd end up being eaten by animals. That tends to be what happens when you make moves on Artemis. And even if you try to get a look at Artemis while she's in a grove, you're in a lot of trouble, trust me. You don't want to mess with Artemis. She's like a professor from Melbourne University. She'll turn on you with full force. Angel just comes up with these ridiculous kind of lines. Does anyone remember this one? They're sitting in the dairy house eating their breakfast, and Tess says something very romantic about how your soul can leave your body. And Angel sees her for the first time, and he responds by going, oh, look at that dairy maid. What a fresh and virginal daughter of nature that milkmaid is.
Fresh and virginal.
Is that, would anyone is that a nice compliment in a way?
Fresh and virginal. My Lord. Hot.
It's pretty bad, isn't it? It's pretty bad.
Fresh.
That's his first line when he kind of recognizes Tess. He goes, oh, she's nice and attractive. Fresh and virginal daughter of nature that milkmaid is. he does it all the way through the novel when he explains Tess to her family. He says she's brim full of poetry, not just any poetry, actualized poetry. So in the one hand, she's this romantic child of nature, but on the other hand, she's kind of very kind of chaste and pure. Purity seems to be very central to the novel. I think it's hard for us in a way to contextualize spiritual purity because we've kind of come a long way and the world's secularized a lot. But Angel has really internalized from childhood upward a very rigid concept of sexual purity. And you see this kind of, not so much in Angel, but in his family. So after kind of Tessa's revelation, Angel returns home and they read this passage over dinner. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. On and on and on about the idea of feminine purity, which you do find scattered throughout the Bible. But in terms of kind of maybe kind of defending Angel a little bit, he is kind of trapped in this communal bubble. Who's he set up to marry?
Is it this one?
Who's Angel kind of arranged to marry?
Oh, I don't know. I
think one of the neighbor's daughter.
Yeah, a doctor of divinity. That for a pure and saintly woman, you will find no one more to your true advantage than Mercy Chant. Does that say it all, the name? Mercy Chant? Mercy Chant. Angel marries Mercy Chant. Like,
God.
Is that a very religious name?
Yeah.
First name Mercy, second name Chant. Chant Mercy. Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. He's got brothers who are total religious bigots. They are. They judge everyone. And they're always judging Angel, saying, you know, keep in touch with morality and ideals when you're around those savages at the dairy farm. The mother, she's totally judgmental. She's totally, you know, when Angel says, you know, like, I'm going to marry Tess, she investigates. Is she a young woman whose history will bear investigation? Does this happen? Does this happen anymore? People investigate their children's partner's history. He's stuck in this religious bubble that he can't really get out of. Maybe I still got lots more slides to go, but we are at 8:50. Maybe I can close it up here by opening it up to discussion. What is the main difference between Angel and Alec? Is there a big difference between the two?
There's the
Are they both villains by the end of the novel?
Yeah.
Sarisha, you mentioned you didn't like Angel after the revelation. Was he just as bad as Alec?
In a way, when like he left Tess just all by herself, I feel like Alec, yes, he seduces her, and like that's a different part of story. But even Angel, he did the same. Even like he didn't give her any support. He left all by herself, and she has to go back to her parents and no help. So I feel like they both are villains. That's just my opinion. Sorry.
Did anyone notice a difference between what Alec the way Alec views Tess and the way Angel views Tess? Do they view her very differently?
Yeah.
Does Angel view Tess sexually at all?
Probably implied. I think so. It's more just like this ethereal.
If he does, I don't think it's as much as Alec.
No, an angel kind of says it all. Like, what is an angel? Like, is an angel a physical being?
No.
No. The famous poet John Milton, actually, he asked this really weird question in Paradise Lost: do angels go to the toilet? Because he was really interested, you know, are angels physical beings? Because if they're physical beings, they're going to need toilets in heaven or something like that.
Oh my God, that is
Angel's very metaphysical. He's very idealistic. He represents this realm of ideas and purity that can't be tainted. Whereas Alec seems to be very materialistic. He's oriented towards basically sex. That's all Alec sees is sex. And he kind of compliments Tess on this. He says, "Oh, damn it, Tess, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. And if you realize this, you would use your beauty as a form of power instead of using it as a form of oppression, blah, 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 blah." But they kind of split. One seems to represent kind of an idealistic view of femininity. The other one seems to be completely vulgarized and interested in the body and sexuality. Angel kind of, maybe there is, as Olivia says, a certain sense of kind of material desire, erotic desire, but it tends to be kind of cancelled out. Is one worse than the other? Does Angel change at the very end of the novel?
God, he turns into a little shit. That's what he does. He turns into a fucking asshole.
He does go back to Tess and attempt to kind of reconcile.
Yes, and it fails, but then kind of he ends up. Does he leave Tess's family after Tess dies, after she's hung?
No, does he not get with Liza Lou or something like that? Because she's like,
yeah,
look at my sister, she's pure.
I know, it's quite disturbing, isn't it? I'm trying to find some goodness to close this out, but it does get very disturbing because Angel, we're kind of led to believe, is going to marry Liza Lou, but it's not going to be kind of. I'm hoping it's going to be a platonic marriage. And they're just getting married so that Angel can support Tessa's siblings and whatnot. But it is rendered quite ambiguous what happens there. I kind of do feel like Angel's just as guilty as Alec when we get to the end of the novel, but perhaps I'm kind of reading too much into it.
No.
I've got 10 more slides to go, but
let's do it.
I think we will call it a day because it's 8:55. What's that, Olivia? I'm just looking in the chat. It says pig dog. Oh my God. Ha ha ha. Sounds like you guys are playing games or something.
No, it was there was meant to be quotes around pig dog because I was quoting Renz. I thought that was funny.
Oh, sorry. Ren says, yeah, an absolute pig dog. What do you mean? What's going on in the chat here? Was this part of the discussion now?
We're talking about Angel and when he judged Tess. Sorry, I'm great with words. Can you tell?
Yeah. Are you describing Angel as a pig dog?
Yeah, when he judged her. Sorry, I'm really crass.
No, I actually want to defend pig dogs because I want to defend pig dogs and say they're not as bad as Angel at that moment because they're victims of people that would make them into pig dogs, and you can't even be associated with them. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a whole session on essay writing, which should be fun. I'm hoping it'll be very fun. I'll teach you the tricks of the trade. As Olivia knows, I've won lots of essay writing competitions. It's one of the only things that I've actually won competitions at. So I can kind of talk with a lot of confidence about essay writing. International competitions, local competitions. I love a good essay writing competition.
Very cool.
But does anyone have any questions? I feel like, I don't know, I feel like this session, I don't know, I care a lot about Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and I feel like we always never get everything done.
Yeah, well, what can you do? Oh.
There's just a lot in it, and it's very rich, so I can understand why.
Hey, yes, it is. I'm also hoping that some of you who go on to teach will teach it at high school, because I do think it would make a good year 11 from year 10 to year 12 text. Perhaps it may be a little too extreme, but no, I don't think so. I think, did you guys find this a confronting novel? Or am I being precious?
No, I mean,
Wuthering Heights was a bit more confronting than this book.
Yeah. it is very confronting, Wuthering Heights. Maybe I
More
should have.
aggressive. Wuthering Heights is just a bit more aggressive, I reckon. But no, I think it's fine.
I would probably argue that Tess would only be maybe a slight more sensitive to people who can somewhat relate to her in experience-wise, which is probably most women.
Yes, I think there's an intimacy. Whereas I think the way Emily Bronte represents things, I won't say comic, but it's almost like a Gothic comic in the sense that it's very bold and thickly sketched, very realistically, but some of the situations are so absurd and the dialogue so ridiculous that you kind of can see it as a form of Gothic comic romance, as opposed to Tess, where there's an intensity and also a sympathy. And that's very different to Wuthering Heights because there's a lot of antipathy towards the characters. And a lot of it's kind of, a lot of it's more just aggression and not kind of, what occurs in Tess. Maybe another question before we end. Who was the worst thus far? Because we're going to see Clifford Chatterley next week. He's pretty bad, but he's disabled, so you've got to be somewhat sympathetic towards him. Is Heathcliff worse than Alec, or is Alec worse than Heathcliff?
I think maybe Alec is worse than Heathcliff because at least Heathcliff owns up to his bullshit. You know what I mean? It's like he's evil, but he knows. He's like, yeah, I want to ruin all of these people's lives, and I'm so happy and willing to do that. I'll go to hell for it. I don't care. Whereas Alec is just like, why would you do this to me? You know, you made me do that, and it's like, bitch. Personal opinion.
Yeah, does Heathcliff have a motive where Alec doesn't? A motive that we can go, that's a just motive.
Neither. Oh, sorry. Continue.
There's a point when Heathcliff is kind of like to Nellie, like I just wasted my entire life trying to like commit this revenge, and now they're all dead. So like, what am I going to do now? And then he dies not long after.
And he's also he's just lost love. He's someone that hates because he doesn't have the chance of love. Whereas, what's Alec's driving motivation?
Sex.
He's a pure hedonist. All he cares about is pleasure. Jamie. Yes. I want to defend those creatures because, they deserve defending. Sometimes, the metaphors and the symbols, I don't know about Alec. No, I don't know. I've read Wuthering Heights just as many times as I've read Tess, and I find that if you closely read Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff has a lot of redeeming features, and he redeems himself, as Soleil says. He kind of comes to a realization that I need to kind of overcome this, whereas Alec does not. Many questions. No. I feel like we've done a lot of work, and we're all... Sorry, was someone about to ask a question? I just kept talking.
Yes, please. Can I just stay behind just for discuss about my essay plan?
Yep. No worries. I think a few people want to kind of ask a few questions about that. I don't know if they're like, are they of a like private and confidential nature that kind of, would it be too much to just talk about it together? I do kind of feel like we're a group and we can chat openly.
Yeah, I don't mind, especially since like we all watched each other's plans, so we're kind of all
Camille, what was your question? I feel like you were set up to write a really great essay. I'm just wondering, have you figured out a way to make an even better one?
Thanks. No pressure. No, just in the feedback you're saying that I could combine my 3 arguments into one, and I'm thinking, oh, that's great, but what about what I write about next? And so I'm just kind of not sure where to take it after I do that.
I see. Well, that was more a suggestion, I think, in my feedback. I said go with which one you might prefer, and follow that through, and come back to it. But what I would actually start doing now is start constructing like leading sentences or topic sentences for your paragraphs. I would just prosecute your arguments and then come back to your thesis statement after you've done that. Yeah, I did notice, I thought your second one was more specific. Then your first one was quite big, wasn't it? It was, and then your second one was
scoping.
Yeah. So, did you feel more for your second thesis statement?
I wrote the second one after I wrote the first one, and it was sort of after I got more into writing about my first paragraph. So I think it was more actually connected to what I was trying to write. So it's probably why I had sort of more to it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was going to say that your secondary thesis statement could become the topic sentence of your first paragraph.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably because I wrote it after my first paragraph.
Yeah. So kind of, it's weird. I just want to say, Camille, just write it. And
I know.
I'm not expecting diamonds, kind of, because you don't have that much time. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't work out. That's another thing I've learned with essay writing. Sometimes I've tried to write the most important essay about fox hunting, and it's gone all astray. That's why it's good to have multiple ideas floating around.
True.
Does anyone have a similar experience where you're interested in something so much and it doesn't quite work out because you've got too much information, and then you just follow this train of thought and it works out?
Yep. That's me with this book right now, Tess. There's so much into, like, one chapter, I can pull out so much out of it, and then I end up sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I can't just do that, and then I have to scrape it all and then think, okay, let me read a bit more and get a bit more details from the other parts of the book.
Yeah, I was curious about your plan, Muwari, about where you were going to focus on the environment, like what sections, and I was going to suggest certain chapters to have a look at, but I do think you will find kind of certain key areas that will be more important than others, and I wouldn't be focusing on a whole ton of them, maybe three or four.
Yeah, that was my problem, because there was just so much that I think I kept going, oh no, this one's probably going to be better in the essay, and then I'm like thinking, oh no, that part's actually going to be better, and then I'm like, okay, no, I have to stop and then start again.
Yeah, I did think you're looking at environment and kind of different spaces and what they're representing. I do think Hardy represents environment a lot differently from, say, Jane Austen.
Yeah.
And you'll definitely see that.
Yeah.
That will be a good kind of point to pursue. Yeah, Hardy's kind of landscapes are considered the most beautiful, but a lot of people often find them incredibly boring. Well, I do. Like, some people just don't like them because they're too vivid. There's too much description.
Yeah, but then it does give you like a good idea, like a good image as well.
Yeah, it's like
like that chapter we looked at in The Chase. Look at the fog. What's going on with the fog? It's very interesting, smoke and patriarchy, because often you'll find men with cigars throughout Victorian literature puffing away and blowing out the smoke. Recently, I wrote a paper on, it was about one of Charlotte Bronte's novels, but there's this Jew, this toxic Jew. And it's weird because it's a work of realism, but when the Jew comes out at night, all the women have to go inside because this Jew kind of controls the whole landscape. And no one's explained like why there's this Jew, but it's very much like The Fog in
the movie. In Fog.
No, in
the
Tess.
same thing happens. They all have to hide.
Yeah, I'm sure that Fog Yeah, I'm sure that fog's quite patriarchal as well. But smoke tends to be very gendered in most narratives.
That's very interesting.
It often tends to be kind of connected to men and kind of death. Often there's a lot of mythologists that connect smoke and honey, and they say that there's a binary between smoke and honey's very feminine and smoke's very masculine. I probably wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
But Claude Lévi-Strauss certainly did in his book From Honey to Ashes. But I'm ranting. Did I kind of answer your question, Camille? Or did I just say write the essay? Sorry.
Yeah, that's sort of the advice I'm getting from.
Well, yeah. Sorry, it's
so
not the best advice. It's not the best advice.
Okay.
But no, what I mean by that is start writing, and I think once you break that spell of, I'm not writing, I don't want to write. Once you start writing, the key is to enjoy it and start kind of getting some stuff down on paper. I often find that that's the weird thing where people go, I hate writing essays. But then a lot of people actually get into doing it and they're like, hey, I actually enjoy doing this. I'm learning more writing this essay than I did for listening to this idiot for the last, 12 sessions. Because you learn while writing. And writing's
I have a lot of hate relationship with essays. Sometimes they're really good. Like the character analysis that we did, that was really fun. Like I really enjoyed that. But this just has a little bit more pressure to it.
You got this.
No, there shouldn't be any pressure. It should be fun, Camille.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll try and enjoy it.
Yeah. Lower your expectations, kind of to err is human.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not a pessimist, but it's like what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say like you only have such a short amount of time to write your essay. I'm not expecting a Pulitzer Prize winning essay. But I'm expecting the seeds of a Pulitzer Prize winning essay in the future.
Ooh, okay, cool.
Maybe I could finish that with a little bit of a riddle. No, it's not a riddle. It's an aphorism. Here we go. Wise words are rarer than emeralds, but they come from the mouths of slave girls that turn the millstones. That's totally kind of...
Wait.
Have you ever heard that saying?
No.
It's like it's a maxim from ancient Egypt. It's the idea that everyone should speak in common with each other, no matter what hierarchy you are or what class you are. Because
I 100%.
The bus driver you meet during the week will probably have something wiser to say than the professor at kind of Harvard University.
Yep.
Wisdom's not lodged in any kind of repository.
Mm-hmm.
It's way too late. It's I feel like Caitlin's conspiring. She's getting a whole data on these rambling sessions and she's gonna put it all together and have like a whole folio.
Gonna knock on Karina's door one morning, be like, Karina, God, you gotta see this, man. Like she's gonna be like, brewing the popcorn for some reason. Come on in, Caitlin. Long time no see.
Yes.
No.
Do you even know my boss's name, which is even more disturbing?
Well, I've had her for a few units before, and she's amazing. But her I very much prefer your teaching over hers. I know it's not a competition, but I do find that the way that you present the information and talk to the class and all of that jazz, it's just, I don't know. It feels it's different.
It's different. Zoom though. It's Zoom. It's not ideal. Like it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Like I don't actually have legs.
I'm gonna head off.
All right. See you, Mawari. No worries. If you have any questions, send some emails and I'll get back to you. Don't expect them to be short though.
No, I like your replies. It's perfect.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think some people do, and some people are like, "Oh, I didn't want that much information."
I do.
But yeah, I don't know about everyone else, but I just found like I was constantly having to decode what Karina was saying because she doesn't really give much time to I don't know, it's just like she speaks another type of English when I'm listening to her, and I find it really hard to it feels like I'm almost like trying to translate what she's saying, and by the time that she asks a question, I'm like, I'm still trying to understand what you said 5 minutes ago, and you're asking a question about what you've just said just now, and I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I feel like it's the opposite, actually. Like for me, my greatest fear, and particularly during this session, is the issue of mansplaining. Like I worry because I almost feel like there's some weird kind of horrible kind of, like it's so Karina gave me the job just to see me get torn up by Bimini ads or the kind of, because like kind of, I don't know, it's kind of, I don't know if I should be kind of like, particularly this session, I don't know whether kind of I have the right to teach it in a way, which is kind of weird, but
what do you mean?
Yeah, I hope it doesn't come across as a mansplain, but
I think you have teached it perfectly. And I also have a theory. Men who worry that they're going to like mansplain are the ones that never do. It's the ones that never think it that always somehow do it.
100%. 100%. That's so funny that you say that. Yeah. Yeah.
I've mansplained before. Yeah, there was one horrible incident, and that's where I learned never to mansplain again or never to try, or when I became aware. It was so stupid. It was like the stupidest example of mansplaining you've ever had. Like, yeah, one can like, yeah, it was such a dumb thing to do.
I don't know.
I won't tell you it, but it was so bad.
More than most.
Hey?
You learn from it, which is more than what most other men would, take in.
I learned from it pretty harshly though. I mansplain to someone who you don't mansplain to. Put it that way.
Oh, bless. I don't know. I still think that I've definitely been put in scenarios where I have very clearly and professionally said, to the best of my ability anyway, because I speak to professionals the same way that I speak just in general, and just saying, that you're mansplaining. I actually have XYZ experience, XYZ knowledge, lived it, etc. And they're just in one ear out the other. So I still, like Saleh was saying, the fact that you are able to be like, fuck, and be like, okay, noted. It is so much more than what I have experienced in the past, and I think you should give yourself credit for that much at least. Like, you've learned from it. You've learned from a mistake. That's worse. You know what I mean? In a scenario where there are a lot of you're in a field where it's like I feel as if it's a bit male dominated. I think it says a lot.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because like English faculties aren't male dominated anymore.
Oh, okay. Just in
they once were. They once were.
Oh wait, yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking like.
And they were really bad. We had that big report on sexual harassment at universities. It just came out recently. I was talking to my old boss, Alexis Harley, and kind of her old boss, Deirdre Coleman, who's she's way up there at the top, but she went to Melbourne University in the 1970s and Sydney University around then. And for women to get ahead during that period, it was a bit like Test of the D'Urbervilles. Like it was a very toxic environment. And the reason why it was toxic is because it was completely homosocial. It was just men controlling everything, and they were like these hideous gatekeepers. So it's one of the only areas in the university that women are really starting to control, and it's good. It's good. Like the way I survive is by focusing on bees.
Which is amazing, and also that's so niche. How did you it's just like I found it, and this is it. You know what I mean? I'm still looking for that myself. You know what? As I imagine a lot of us are.
Oh, no, like these are good for feminism, right? Because they're like matriarchies that kill the males. So you can be like, you think your feminism is extreme? Like, look at my side.
We're going to go and suffocate all these dudes and come back. We'll just make more guys later. Yeah. My dad has beehives, and I ended up googling a whole bunch of info because I was like, I have no idea, like, where did this come from? Okay, cool. And yeah, just all that information, I was like, what the okay, just casually.
Yeah. Are they Langstroth hives? Are they hives you pull out like that?
I don't know. I don't go close enough because there's so many of them. They're like really tall. I don't know.
Is it a square box?
Yeah, it's a box, and he adds more to them as they...
Supers. They're called supers, where you put another hive on top of another hive.
Yeah, lots of hives all together kind of thing. Yeah. It's cool. No,
bees are good. Sorry, Sarisha, I think you're waiting to ask a question. Do you want to ask it tomorrow before class or send it via email?
Sorry, I prefer talking to you because I'm working until 5:30 tomorrow. I don't get a chance to come to the class earlier. Sorry.
No, that's all right. So it's about your plan. What are you concerned about?
Can I please share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
I'm going to scoot, but see you, Chris. See you tomorrow. Bye, guys.
See you, Olivia.
Bye, Olivia.
Bye.
Okay, sorry. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So in the feedback, you said like you're a bit concerned about like how I'll relate the Gothic with domestic violence and
yes. I was just a little concerned. I thought, where are you going to kind of look at that? So you'll be probably looking at the Grange. No, sorry, the Wuthering Heights and the way kind of Isabella's somewhat trapped there.
Yes, and other one is like exploitation. I was thinking about like how Heathcliff was treated by Hindley very badly in I think chapter 9, and like I had like a bunch of chapters and bunch of things which I can add in my essay. But what I worried much is about like is my thesis statement is not correct because you gave just like credit for that.
No, I probably just kind of the first Gothic novel. Can you go back up to your thesis statement?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Oh, come on. Explain. Yeah, that's the thing.
I'm going to discuss what is Gothic and how Wuthering Heights is a Gothic novel. Then I will discuss why Bronte chooses Gothic to represent the world of Wuthering Heights. This novel provides a romantic narrative but is often associated with antipathy. Gothic is a perfect genre to show the reality of social problems such as domestic violence, exploitation, inequality in the middle of the 19th century. I will support my argument with appropriate articles from the VU Collaborate. I think one of the things I was concerned about that there kind of wasn't too much specificity about why Gothic is the perfect genre to show the reality of social problems. I don't actually think there's a problem with your thesis statement. Sometimes my feedback is just to give you some kind of feedback, some critical feedback. So maybe it had like the wrong intention here. So I apologize for that. But no, I think I asked about exploitation because I wasn't so sure about that. But now that you explain it, Hindley and Heathcliff and then Heathcliff and Hareton,
Yes.
That makes perfect sense.
It's completely exploitation and inequality when, like Catherine said, sorry, is it okay if I talk to you just for 2 to 3 minutes? Or am I keeping you too late?
No, keep going.
Like Catherine spoke with Nelly and she said like, what's his name? Edgar proposed me to marry, and she said like, I want to marry him. And Nelly asked why you want to do it, because he had money, because he had name and fame in the society, whereas marrying Heathcliff is degrading. So I feel like that's completely inequality, even though Heathcliff grew up with her in the same house, because he's like, Hindley make him to work as a slave. So that's why she's telling like it's degrading. So I want to discuss about that, like inequality in 19th century. That's why she doesn't want to marry Heathcliff.
No. Yeah. I understand. Like, I think it's a great thesis statement. I just kind of thought that it was a little bit vague, but it's not vague at all, because you're looking at kind of exploitation, inequality. Do you think you'll look at domestic violence? Because if you just want to look at kind of two things, that's fine as well.
I want to discuss about domestic violence as well, because when Isabella treated very badly by Heathcliff, he used to beat her, he used to pull her hair and all that, but she left with no help. She can't explain everything what he does, even though like indirectly she explained to Nelly, but not point to point. And like even in Catherine Jr., when treated very badly by Heathcliff, she left for like no help. She has to just show her angriness in front of Nelly. That's it. She can't do anything else. She can't go out and spend time with her dad and stuff. So I feel like this domestic violence is a big issue in Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, so for me, kind of, I think generally the feedback was just a suggestion. When you explore these themes, domestic violence, exploitation, inequality, try to connect them to the Gothic. For example, when Catherine says it would degrade her to marry Heathcliff, Heathcliff leaves and there's a violent thunderstorm. So there's that Gothic trope of nature personifying Heathcliff's emotions. So in a way, you want to explore all these themes because that's going to give you great stuff to discuss. But always, and I think I suggested this in the feedback, ask yourself how and why the Gothic's being used here. Because for maybe perhaps one reason why Emily Bronte uses the environment in a Gothic fashion, like a violent thunderstorm, is to convey emotionally how Heathcliff feels. Because it's a poetic way to represent human emotion, and it conveys a visceral, imaginative feeling to a reader. Likewise with domestic violence, there's a moment in the text where Heathcliff basically says, I would like to paint Isabella's face the colours of the rainbow, which is a very Gothic and grotesque suggestion, even though it might sound peaceful and harmonious. He's actually talking about abusing Isabella, giving her a purple eye or giving her kind of a blood cheek or something.
That's interesting. Wow.
Look at also the way, particularly when we talked about the Gothic, we talked about grotesque animals and the sublime. Look at the way Heathcliff looks at Isabella. He looks at her like a centipede, a weird creature from the Indies. So try to tie in all the Gothic tropes you can find to issues of domestic violence, because kind of Gothic is a perfect genre to show the reality of social problems such as domestic violence, exploitation, inequality in the middle of the 19th century. I do think, Sarisha, though, here, yes, I think there's another sentence here that's going to add to your thesis statement, and that may come only after you've written the entirety of your essay, and that is Gothic is a perfect genre to show the reality of social problems such as domestic violence, exploitation, inequality in the middle of the 19th century, because the Gothic does something to convey to the reader, and this will be up to you to kind of, this will be your point. I can't answer this for you because it doesn't really, there's no answer to this. It's your opinion. It's not kind of something you can find in a book. It's something that you think, something you'll come to, perhaps because the Gothic it uses darkness and the macabre to convey or to kind of represent these problems in such a way? Does the Gothic directly show them? Before, Mawari, I think, was mentioning that I found Wuthering Heights to be more confronting than Tess of the D'Urbervilles. But then Soleil said, but the way Tess of the D'Urbervilles uses realism to kind of create an intimacy actually makes it more kind of confronting, because you feel a lot more for Tess than you kind of do for, say, Catherine Earnshaw. So you want to question the way the Gothic represents the world, and how that might relate to Emily Bronte's choice to look at these themes like domestic violence, exploitation, and inequality. So if you can have a because or an explanation as to why the Gothic is the perfect genre, that's going to add another dimension to your thesis statement, because you'll be explaining to the reader not only that the Gothic is used to represent social problems, you'll also be saying why it's perfect. And if you can answer, and there's no correct answer here as well. This is your opinion, because this is not science. It's not mathematics. There's no correct answer. But if you can have a go at trying to answer why you think the Gothic is a perfect genre, that's going to add another dimension to your argument. And that's in a way what literary studies is about. Like it's about many things, but it's about actualizing your own critical thinking in this context. I think I mentioned this to Caitlin actually in a feedback kind of. I think I mentioned that none of us see the world exactly the same, and that's the good thing, because I would like to see the world the way Caitlin sees the world when she writes her essay, because that's going to give me insights into the way I don't see the world. And it's the same with you, Sarisha. Like, in a way, one thing you've got to do in writing an essay is kind of show that you're across things like the Gothic, and that you've read Wuthering Heights, and you know Wuthering Heights has serious themes like domestic violence, and also, I think it's also child exploitation as well. So it's exploitation, but I'm not saying exploitation is wrong as well, because it's exploitation, but I do think there's another dimension, and it's quite Gothic as well, in a cruel way. It's about the exploitation of childhood. But once again, like, it's what interests one, and what actually produces originality is the fact that we've all have different life histories as well. It's not just that we see the world because one of us is colorblind and one of us isn't. We all come from different kind of perspectives, and that's the great thing about kind of arguing and writing essays. That's why I write my essays on bees, because no one sees the world through the eyes of bees.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, would you believe that your eyebrows are there because you once had antennae?
Oh my gosh.
No, that's the first time I learned that.
That is so alien.
Interesting.
And
hold on. No. Well, you didn't, that's a theory, okay?
Right.
Oh, okay.
This is my theory.
Well,
it's my
why
theory.
else would they be there? I don't know.
No. Charles Darwin writes about it in The Expression of Emotions in Animals and Man. And he talks about we need eyebrows, like, to make mean faces and to kind of gesture. Do you know Peter Dutton, the defense minister? He shaves his eyebrows off.
Fascinating.
He doesn't want any hair on his body.
That's clever. I mean, everyone's going to be just focusing on how much of a weirdo. Oh,
yeah.
Bless. But
do you also know there's a bone in your finger? It's called a hamuli. And no one knows why that bone is there, but many people think is because once upon a time, our hands and our arms were wings. We were little bees, and we had our wings like that. And the structure of the bone is actually part of the exoskeleton of the structure of a wing of a bee.
Oh, my gosh, I really hope that's true. That'd be so amazing.
It could be.
Bless.
It could be.
Thank
Do
you
you
so
think-
much, Chris. Sorry,
No
sorry,
worries.
Caroline. I had one more question. Do we have to read Ladies Chatterley's Lover for quiz?
Should I say yes so you read it?
I know you didn't have to answer. That was enough of an answer.
No, do you know what I'm going to do? Is all this weekend, just focus on your essay. Focus solely on your essay. On Monday, I'll probably send out an email saying we'll read some chapters in class. What I actually want to do with Lady Chatterley's Lover is try to set it up as reading that you can do for yourself in your own time after this unit ends. Because in a way, like a lot of people do this subject because they have to, but the whole idea of literature is like it's to be enjoyed. It's not to study. So you don't have to read Lady Chatterley's Lover. I don't think there's going to be any questions on the quiz about Lady Chatterley's Lover. The questions on the quiz will be more about kind of key concepts like in this unit, we looked at the sublime in relation to Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, or was it more in relation to Tess of the D'Urbervilles, or was it more in relation to Wuthering Heights?
It's Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, so it's more kind of, Caitlin's probably going, geez, that's a simple question, but you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. Some students haven't turned up at all, and they'll probably either get it wrong or not even do the quiz or something like that. So the quiz is more just oriented around making sure that you guys have like got some grasp of some of the concepts we've discussed, such as the Gothic, the Sublime, a free and indirect discourse. Also perhaps things like the difference between romance and romanticism. Like one refers to a kind of historical period, one refers to a narrative structure. So there won't be any specific questions like in chapter 7 of Lady Chatterley's Lover, where do they embrace? It won't be like that, no. Now, the reason why I wanted to teach Lady Chatterley's Lover is it's a very important novel in terms of the history of censorship, but it's also kind of, Tess is a very traumatic novel about sexuality. So we can move from Tess to kind of something a bit more positive and progressive. It will be good because I don't want to end this unit with like, look out, stay away from people because they'll probably hurt you. And also one of the interesting things about Lady Chatterley's Lover is she's got all the power. Mallers is just this kind of, well, he's a bit like Hareton, Earnshaw, except he kind of, Mallers is kind of, maybe you can watch an adaptation, although I don't know which one to suggest because they're all pretty raunchy and it's a bit weird because you go like, yeah, I'm not sure which adaptation is kind of less raunchy than the other because the novel's actually not as raunchy as the adaptations, which says a lot. Like all of the adaptations they kind of, in a way though, I don't want to talk for too long. Lady Chatterley's Lover is also interesting because most modern TV kind of dramas are structured very similar to Lady Chatterley's Lover in having about 3 sex scenes per episode. I don't know if you watch any kind of TV serials, but they'll often have a lot of kind of erotic moments kind of chucked in to keep the narrative going. But yeah, we'll get to Lady Chatterley's Lover on Monday. But just for now, focus on your long essay because yeah, that's what matters. But yeah, you're really on the right path. It was just more, can we answer the question about why Gothic is perfect? Like even if you weren't to answer that question, you're still looking at like a low D probably, kind of. But if you were to kind of go a step further, you'd be pushing up higher in terms of your mark.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
No worries, Tarisha.
Do
you have a question, Caitlin?
A question for me?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Fire away.
No, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I just like to hang around because I'm just one of those
Oh,
people.
Cool. One thing I might ask is,
yes.
I wasn't serious about doing a dissertation on rabies. I don't know if you've read your feedback.
I did.
But-
No. I totally. I got it.
No, I did recommend those 2 readings, one by Tony Tanner, which is
Yes.
probably long and boring.
No,
But-
I've got them saved. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. Have a look at them, because Tony Tanner looks at how emotion needs to be justified kind of rationally in a lot of Jane Austen's fiction, whereas Virginia Woolf has a very different spin on passion. So, and
alright.
Virginia Woolf kind of in a way, she's like a godlike presence in the sense that she died in like the late 1930s, but she still kind of controls a lot of literature from the beyond, from her essays and things.
That's so
She's
interesting.
she's very spooky. She's very spooky.
Yeah.
Probably the
Just
smartest
always
woman that
around.
ever lived. Maybe. I don't know.
No, I love
Yeah.
that. I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, I have them saved, and depending on how my printer goes, I'll print them because it needs to be tangible for me to actually absorb them properly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, just kind of. Yeah, I think your plan was really great, and your video was really great as well.
Thanks. You know, I tried to record it like the first time I rambled, and it was like near 20 minutes, and I was like, oh nah, I gotta stop that. Redid it, and then I went, oh great, that's perfect time frame, no probs. Went to watch it, my microphone wasn't on.
Oh,
So I was like, oh
that's
my
bummer.
gosh. So I went to do it again, and I was just like, nah, it's all business right now. And even still, I was like, I feel like I'm still rambling, but whatever. Anyways, but I'm glad you enjoyed the video.
There was
lot
another
shorter.
student. There was another student, Kayla. She doesn't really speak much at all. Yes, on Monday, she waited around until the end of the class, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I did this wrong, and I did this wrong." And she made the most beautiful presentation I've ever seen. It was just, she must have spent so much time on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, what feedback can you give, like, to say thank you? Because she did so much kind of work, and she was so worried because she thought she did it all wrong. So all you could say was like, you know, you couldn't have done it better. Like, you could not have done it better. Often I find that it's bizarre, but yeah, kind of some people are very unsure of themselves when they just need to be told, like, everything you're doing is perfect. But
I don't know.
yeah,
It's
getting
one of
pretty
those
late,
things,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's getting late. It's getting late.
So we're doing essays tomorrow, and it should be
So
fun.
exciting. I just messaged Basil because he's asked me to let him know when it was the essay day. So excited.
Oh,
How
Basil.
amazing is Basil's voice? Every time he talks, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, Basil hasn't presented though. He
No,
hasn't
he's
sent a
read.
plan in.
He's read. He hasn't started planning his essay.
No, he hasn't done a plan. Can you tell him that? Say
Yeah,
Chris
yeah.
said.
For sure.
I'm sure he'll like that, but
No, all good. I'll just shoot him a little message-a-rooney. But yeah, every
I
time he
don't know.
reads in class, I'm like, yes. I don't know, like auditory sensations. I'm just like, yes, it tickles my brain. It's great.
yeah, he could be a narrator in audiobooks.
Right? I think so. Totally. Oh, bless. But I just wanted to ask really quickly as well. With my essay plan, actually no, I'm just gonna write it. Are you fine if I email you randomly and I'm like, this is what I've got
Yeah,
so far?
yeah,
Does
yeah.
that sound okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
All right, we'll call it a day. I'll see you guys tomorrow because we'll be back here at 6.
Thank you. Good night.
Oh.
See you
See ya.
tomorrow.